Long ago, at a hospital, due to a nurse's mistake when swapping the positions of two children. Although it was just a small error, it completely changed the fate of those two children. Many years later, when those children gradually grew up, this young man was named Nagi. He lived with his parents, and their family had a cute little sister. Her name was Saki. Nagi and Saki always argued, sometimes even over the simplest reason, like an egg. After 16 years, Nagi's family finally discovered the truth. Back then, after Nagi was born, he had been swapped with another child. Now everything has been revealed. Even Nagi himself is preparing to meet his biological parents. He really doesn't know much about the past. Surprisingly, everyone in the family still acted very normally. Although Nagi's parents still laughed and talked happily, in reality, they were not happy at all. And Saki was the most heartbroken, because her feelings for Nagi were very strong. Having lived together for more than 16 years, Saki now thought that Nagi was about to become a stranger to her. She suddenly burst into tears because she couldn't yet accept this truth. Therefore, Nagi immediately comforted his little sister. Later, on his way to the meeting point, he unexpectedly came across a girl standing on a railing. Nagi thought she was about to do something reckless, so he quickly ran over to stop her. But unfortunately, Nagi accidentally touched the girl's chest. As a result, she gave Nagi a hard slap. It turned out that the girl's name was Amano. She was very famous online and well known by many people. So Amano's earlier actions were just an act to gain more followers from it. But there was another reason as well. That was, when Amano caused such a commotion, it was to prevent her parents from forcing her into marriage. However, Nagi ruined everything, and he was very surprised by Amano's situation. Later, Nagi also shared about his own situation, so Amano was able to understand him somewhat. Since both of them had their own personal problems after talking for a while, they realized they were the same age. Suddenly, Nagi remembered that Amano had been mentioned by some of his classmates before. At that time, he thought Amano's beauty was just edited. However, seeing Amano in person now left him completely surprised because of Amano's natural beauty. After a while, Amano came up with an idea. Nagi was perfectly suited to become her boyfriend. This was part of Amano's plan to prevent her parents from forcing her into marriage. At that moment, Amano felt proud of her own cleverness. However, Nagi unexpectedly crushed that idea because he had no intention of participating in it, since Nagi was preparing to go to the meeting to see his biological parents. He didn't have much time to spend with Amano. After being rejected by Nagi, Amano became angry, and she began to threaten Nagi because of what Amano had recorded earlier. When Nagi accidentally touched Amano's sensitive area, if that video were sent to Nagi's school, he would be completely ruined, and Nagi certainly didn't want that to happen. So he reluctantly had to agree to become Amano's boyfriend. Then Amano proceeded with the plan she had devised. Since she wanted them to look like a real couple, they decided to change their styles together. Nagi was surprised by Amano's wealth, because she bought things without even looking at the price. For Nagi's ordinary family, this was extremely shocking and surprising to him. Finally, the two of them managed to take a photo together. However, Amano's outfit looked rather bold, combined with her earlier display of power and wealth. This made Nagi think that Amano's family must be a notorious mafia. But in reality, that was not the case. It turned out that Amano's parents owned a hotel. Meanwhile, Amano seemed disappointed because things didn't go as she had expected. Since their previous photos weren't natural enough, Amano feared they couldn't be used to pretend about their current relationship. Amano's ultimate goal was to prevent her parents from pressuring her into marriage. Unexpectedly, Amano chose the first photo because she thought it looked the most intimate. Suddenly, Nagi blushed as Amano's cuteness unexpectedly appeared. He didn't even dare to look her straight in the eyes. However, when Amano's parents saw the photo, they both immediately realized it was just Amano's prank, leaving Amano unsure of what to do next. Suddenly, a group of strangers appeared. They were angry because they misunderstood that Amano had a boyfriend. It turned out that these people were students from the neighboring school of Amano, and they were the ones who had been stalking her, because Amano was also quite famous at school. Suddenly, Nagi stepped forward to handle the situation. He revealed to the group that they were currently a couple. making one of them unable to believe it. He was about to attack Nagi out of anger. However, Nagi was not only unafraid, but confidently responded with a strong strike, scaring them away. Amano was also very impressed with Nagi, because of his courageous action just now. A little later, it was time for Amano to return home. She didn't forget to thank Nagi for everything. Amano thought they probably wouldn't see each other again, so she confidently revealed that she had really enjoyed today, because she felt it was like a date. Then Amano quickly left, leaving Nagi alone and bewildered. When evening came, Nagi ran to the meeting point with his biological parents. When he arrived, he still couldn't believe it. Then both his adoptive parents and biological parents informed him that everyone loved Nagi, and it would be wonderful if he married the girl, with whom there had been a mix-up long ago. It turned out that the girl was Amano, and this truth made it hard for Nagi to accept immediately. From that day on, Nagi officially had a fiancé, but he didn't like this situation happening, because Nagi already had someone he liked at school, and that girl's name was Sagawa. Returning to the present, Nagi was extremely shocked to find out that Amano was preparing to come to his house. It turned out Amano had discussed this with Nagi's parents, saying that she really wanted to come here. Afterwards, Nagi reconsidered. This must be the reason why he could tell Amano the truth, that Nagi's heart already belonged to someone else. However, a long time had passed, yet Nagi hadn't seen Amano anywhere. Unexpectedly, she had been standing at the door for a long time, because Amano didn't ring the bell and just waited for Nagi. When she was there, no one else was home, as everyone in Nagi's family had their own work. Surprisingly, this made Nagi extremely nervous. Indeed, the atmosphere between the two now seemed awkward, because neither of them spoke a word to each other. Afterwards, Amano asked Nagi for a favor. She wanted to tour Nagi's real house, because Amano thought this place was just a storage house. This surprised Nagi in this situation. Even so, he still went along with Amano's wishes. Unexpectedly, Amano seemed very interested in this house, because she had never seen it before. Finally, Amano was able to tour this house. Afterwards, it was Nagi's turn. Amano took him to her house for a tour. Unexpectedly, this made Nagi unable to believe it. Amano's current residence was very different from Nagi's house. He could hardly stand, because of the large things in that place. At this moment, Nagi finally realized that this was also the reason Amano had been surprised by Nagi's small house. Afterwards, Nagi learned an unexpected truth. Amano also didn't like being forced into marriage like this. The reason she came to Nagi's house was to meet his parents. However, they had already gone to work since early morning. At this point, Nagi planned to take Amano to his parents' workplace, because Amano had something to discuss with them. So the two of them arrived at his parents' restaurant. Suddenly, Amano unexpectedly became angry. It turned out she didn't want to be forced into marriage, because this was a matter of her whole life. Unexpectedly, Amino and Nami also refused to back down, so they ended up having a fierce argument. This made Nagi stand outside, feeling dizzy, because he didn't know what to do next. But it turned out that it was just Nagi's imagination. As for Amano, she didn't dare say anything, and then she suddenly left. This left everyone around bewildered. It turned out that even Amano felt very uncomfortable because she couldn't say a word to her own parents. At this moment, Nagi understood the problem, so he tried every way to comfort Amano. Finally, the whole family truly enjoyed being together, and Amano was very grateful for this. As for Saki, she remained the same. She still couldn't accept that Amano was her biological sister. The next day, Nagi was surprised to have to live with Amano for a period of time. It turned out that this arrangement was made by both sets of parents. Although Nagi resisted this situation, he couldn't do anything about it, so both of them had to follow the adults' instructions. As for Amano, she was already used to this. Therefore, she set some rules so that the two of them wouldn't have to interfere with each other anymore. Unexpectedly, Nagi agreed immediately, because in his heart, there was only Sagawa. The next day, the two of them went about their daily activities together. But Nagi still wasn't used to this feeling, so he didn't feel comfortable at all. However, when Nagi happened to observe Amano, he also admitted that Amano was truly cute. That was also the reason why she was so popular online. Suddenly, due to an accident, the two of them ended up very close to each other. which made them extremely embarrassed at that moment. But Amano quickly found something else to do afterwards. Unexpectedly, they had now become closer, even though previously neither of them wanted to have anything to do with the other. Afterwards, Amano became a little curious about why Nagi was so obsessed with studying, since in all his free time, he only thought about studying. It turned out that Nagi wanted his parents to have peace of mind in the future. So he worked very hard on his studies. As for Nagi, he also couldn't understand why Amano was so obsessed with social media. But her reason was very simple. Amano just wanted to connect with more people. And there was one person she really wanted to talk to. But that was a secret, because Amano didn't want them to be involved with each other. At mealtime, Nagi had prepared everything very carefully, which surprised Amano greatly. The next morning, Nagi was on his way to school. He overheard people around talking about his family. They had heard that Nagi's family was very poor. But Nagi didn't care about this at all. He just wanted to focus on his studies. A little later, Nagi suddenly received a letter. The sender had arranged to meet Nagi on the rooftop because they had something to discuss. At that moment, Nagi noticed Sagawa secretly watching him. This surprised Nagi greatly. He couldn't believe this unexpected situation. It turned out that Sagawa was a perfect person in Nagi's eyes. She was not only excellent in academics, but also very skilled in interacting with others. Therefore, Sagawa was admired by many people. Afterwards, Nagi received his academic results from the previous semester. Unexpectedly, Nagi had ranked first this time. He had successfully surpassed Sagawa, which made Nagi somewhat surprised. After school ended, Nagi went to the previous meeting spot set by an anonymous person. Unexpectedly, it turned out to be Sagawa. Sagawa came just to tell Nagi that would try to reclaim the first place. She even wanted to be first in everything at school, because she didn't want to lose to Nagi. And then, Sagawa left immediately afterwards. This left Nagi bewildered by Sagawa's determination. Unexpectedly, that night, Nagi suddenly caught a mild cold. But he still tried to concentrate on studying, because in the afternoon, Nagi had witnessed Sagawa's fierce determination. Therefore, he couldn't stay idle either. However, Nagi couldn't endure it any longer. So he suddenly fainted. When Nagi woke up, he was lying in Amano's room, because she had accidentally discovered Nagi. Amano made great efforts to pull him back to bed to rest. And she didn't forget to advise Nagi to take care of his health. Returning to the time of the announcement of evaluation results, Nagi had ranked first, which shocked those who had previously looked down on him. Everyone couldn't believe this was real. Nagi stood from a distance, watching Sagawa. Although Sagawa was only in second place, she didn't feel upset at all. At that moment, Sagawa shared with everyone that she had done her best, so she accepted the result. This made Nagi admire her even more. Later, in the afternoon, the two had an appointment on the school rooftop. At that moment, Nagi unexpectedly confessed to Sagawa, because previously she had declared, if anyone could surpass her first place ranking, Sagawa would go on a date with that person. And so, Nagi took this opportunity to do just that, which surprised Sagawa a little. Unexpectedly, she then came up with many tricks just to refuse Nagi's confession. It turned out that Sagawa already had a fiancé, so she couldn't accept this situation. This kept Nagi thinking about it endlessly, and he also felt uncomfortable. Suddenly, Amano unexpectedly appeared in Nagi's room, startling him. Unexpectedly, Amano came to inform him that their 2-week period of living together had ended. Time really flew, and even Nagi was surprised by this. However, the time he spent there had been truly comfortable, because Nagi could study freely as he wished, since the space there was extremely quiet. As for Amano, it was the opposite. She didn't feel happy at all. It turned out Amano had gained weight from the delicious meals that Nagi had prepared. She even had to do other household chores, because there was no one else besides her and Nagi. Afterwards, Nagi returned alone to his original house. Unexpectedly, in just 2 weeks, Nagi missed the people at home very much. However, his house was locked and no one was there. So Nagi quickly called his mother. It turned out that some issues had occurred at their house yesterday. So today everyone had moved to another place. Thus, Nagi had no choice but to return to the new house he had left earlier. Unexpectedly, when Nagi returned, he saw Amano was also there. The reason was that Amano wanted to try living independently to see how it felt. No matter what happened, the two of them now returned to live together. A little later, Saki would also come here to give Nagi a few things. But this greatly surprised Amano, because she was about to meet her younger sister. So Amano didn't know what to do. Just as she had predicted, when Saki appeared, Amano didn't even know how to greet her, which made her extremely tense. So Nagi had to guide Saki to tour the house. Thanks to this, Amano felt a bit more relaxed. It turned out that even Saki was very nervous, because earlier she had tried to learn about Amano, and she found out that Amano was very popular. In fact, in real life, she was even cuter than in the photos. So Saki didn't know what to say when they met. At that moment, Nagi noticed the situation was awkward. Therefore, he came up with an idea. Everyone would cook together. Nagi thought this was also a good way to help bring the two of them closer. However, things didn't seem very promising. So Nagi had to go into the kitchen alone. Unexpectedly, when everyone ate together, Sachi's and Amano's gestures were extremely similar. Afterwards, Amano took Saki into her room, because she wanted Saki to try many different dresses. Saki had never worn clothes like this before. Unexpectedly, it looked extremely cute. This naturally strengthened the bond between the two. The next day, Nagi's mood was very low. He didn't even want to go to school. It turned out Nagi was still affected by the aftermath of Sagawa rejecting his confession. He didn't know how to face it. But unexpectedly, when Nagi arrived in class, Sagawa acted as if nothing had happened before. She behaved very naturally toward Nagi, which surprised him a little. Afterwards, the two of them spent some time together. They studied a topic together. When their conversation ended, unexpectedly, Sagawa wanted to continue like this, which shocked Nagi at the suggestion. Not only that, he was also very happy, because Nagi could spend the morning with the person he secretly liked. Nagi even began imagining a scene of them getting married. However, the teacher interrupted his train of thought, as the teacher introduced to everyone a student who had just transferred here. Unexpectedly, that person was Amano, which left Nagi staring in disbelief when he saw her face. The classmates around were also very surprised. It turned out Amano had been expelled, because a few days ago she encountered some unexpected incidents, which led to this situation. But the important thing now was that the two of them were studying together. Amano reminded Nagi that their engagement must absolutely remain a secret at school. Meanwhile, Amano drew a lot of attention and discussion from those around her. Indeed, many people were watching her. Unexpectedly, Sagawa approached Amano to get acquainted. However, Amano still felt a little out of place in this new environment. So she couldn't talk to anyone. But thanks to Sagawa's friendliness, therefore, the two of them were acting more naturally with each other. However, this made Nagi feel awkward, because the person he liked was gradually getting close to his fiancée. At that moment, Nagi imagined a scene where, if the two girls found out the truth, his life would definitely be in danger. So he decided to observe the two of them. Nagi planned to separate them, in order to avoid future trouble. But the people around were very excited when they saw the closeness between Sagawa and Amano, because both of them were famous at school. After several days, Amano and Sagawa grew even closer, which even surprised Nagi. But he couldn't do anything, so Nagi could only watch them from a distance. However, Sagawa suddenly burst into tears. So Nagi didn't know what had happened, yet he ran over from afar. It turned out that Sagawa was a huge fan of Amano, so she easily took the initiative to get acquainted with her. Afterwards, the three of them went home together. On the way back, Amano confided that she wasn't good at studying, so she was very worried about this issue at the moment. Unexpectedly, after learning about the situation, Sagawa also saw Nagi, so Sagawa wanted to help Amano with her studies. She wanted all three of them to be able to study together. The next day, everyone began to carry out the plan from before. However, Sagawa couldn't find Amano anywhere, which made her a little worried. Unexpectedly, Amano suddenly appeared shortly after. She was wearing an extremely cute outfit, which made even Sagawa very excited about it. As for Nagi, he had a bad premonition. Then, everyone began studying seriously. However, Amano seemed to struggle a lot, because her knowledge was not sufficient. Nagi realized this problem. Unexpectedly, Because of this, the two of them had a fierce argument. Sagawa looked on in bewilderment, because she didn't know what was happening. When Nagi returned home, he was extremely surprised to see Sagawa there as well. It turned out she had come to Amano's house to hang out. However, Nagi was still in this house, so he was trying every way to hide. Unexpectedly, the people who had been following Amano earlier, they also found out about this new house. At that moment, the group intended to enter, but Nagi was standing at the door waiting. He easily defeated the leader, which quickly terrified the rest of them. A little later, Sagawa went home as well. Thus, Nagi successfully avoided being discovered. When evening came, Amano went past Nagi's room to inform him that the school would soon organize a visit to several places. Since Nagi hadn't paid attention in class, Amano reminded him again at home. Amano wouldn't participate, because she was the daughter of the hotel owner. Amano was very famous, and for security reasons, she couldn't join school activities. Unexpectedly, Nagi wasn't interested in this either. He wanted to use that time to study on his own. However, Nagi's plan failed, because he was the group leader for this field trip. The next morning, because of this, Nagi had no choice but to participate in the school activity. Unexpectedly, he suddenly invited Sagawa to join his group. Even more surprising, Sagawa immediately agreed. A little later, when Nagi was sitting alone thinking about the schedule, he began imagining the scene of the outing. It was a place with only him and Sagawa. But Sagawa suddenly appeared, which startled Nagi, because he didn't know when Sagawa had arrived. Fortunately, she had just arrived. Unexpectedly, Sagawa was really looking forward to this outing. At that moment, Nagi fantasized that it could be an opportunity for them to go on a date together. When they were heading home, suddenly it started raining heavily. But they still walked home together. On the way, Nagi brought up the topic of his previous confession. However, Sagawa didn't want to continue discussing it, because she already had a fiancé. Sagawa's life had always followed predetermined destinies, so this time would be no different. But if someone was capable enough to surpass her, she also wanted, just once, to change that destiny. At that moment, Sagawa straightforwardly said, "Nagi, try changing it and see what happens." This surprised him. In an instant, Nagi understood the meaning of Sagawa's words. When Nagi got home, he had already set a major goal for his studies. Unexpectedly, Amano appeared, and she showed Nagi a photo of a young man. It turned out that he would also be a member of Nagi's group. This boy's name is Asuma. He has the appearance of a delinquent, which made Nagi somewhat worried. The next morning, everyone gathered at the train station to prepare for departure, because today was the day the whole school participated in the field trip. Unexpectedly, Amano also showed up. It turned out that this activity was nearby, so Amano could easily come. She was not worried about the surrounding issues. As for Asuma, he couldn't handle it at all, when he was in the same group with two beautiful girls. As soon as the two got close, Asuma could hardly breathe anymore. After that, he asked Nagi for his opinion, whether Asuma could confess his feelings to Amano. But Nagi didn't know how to respond at that moment. Afterwards, everyone split into two groups to go sightseeing. Unexpectedly, Asuma had just met Amano. Yet the two of them were extremely natural together. Meanwhile, Nagi was busy observing both of them. It seemed that he was jealous when he saw the closeness between Asuma and Amano. Even Sagawa noticed Nagi's concern, because she had seen it throughout today's journey. After a while, Nagi had the chance to be alone with Amano, so he started taking photos of Amano. However, things did not go smoothly. Suddenly, Nagi became curious about the person Amano wanted to touch, since earlier she had shared this with Nagi. But Amano didn't say anything. Then she slowly turned around. If Nagi truly wanted to know, destiny might be changed. However, by the time Nagi got home, after the school trip ended, he still didn't know who that person was. This only made Nagi even more curious. Later, Saki came over, mainly to see Amano. However, Amano hadn't returned yet. It turned out she came back later than expected. So Saki temporarily had to hang out with Nagi. But he had no interest at all. Thus, Saki started suspecting that something had happened to Amano. However, Nagi refused to reveal anything. So Saki hurried home, not seeing Amano. Unexpectedly, she returned home to prepare her things. because Saki wanted to stay by Amano's side at that time. So she decided to move in and live with them. This surprised Nagi a lot. Even his parents didn't know the reason. While Saki and Amano were talking together, Nagi immediately ran over to stop Saki, because he didn't want Saki to move in here, since the parents of both of them were also worried. However, Saki didn't want that, so a fierce conflict arose between the two siblings. It turned out that the reason Saki came here was because she wanted to study together. Since Saki knew the current situation of the family, finding a good school was necessary. This made Nagi somewhat moved at that time, so he reluctantly agreed to let it happen. But the real reason wasn't like that. When Saki entered Amano's room, she finally dared to reveal it. It turned out that Saki wanted to be a little closer to Nagi. Ever since Amano first came to their parents' restaurant, Saki suddenly thought that everything would end, and Nagi would just get married. This was something Saki could hardly accept. So she came here to be near Nagi. Unexpectedly, Nagi was outside the room, hearing everything. He was completely shocked by this reason, because Nagi was surprised by the feelings Saki had for him. So Nagi later asked his parents for permission to let Saki stay so he could take care of her for a while. After several days, Amano was surprised by Nagi's unusually different style. However, she wasn't curious about it at all. It turned out that Nagi had a date with Sagawa today, so he dressed specially like this. When Nagi arrived at the meeting spot, he was even more surprised by Sagawa's beautiful and striking appearance. Nagi didn't even dare to look straight at her. Afterwards, the two went into the amusement park. They really had a fun time together. However, Nagi seemed uneasy at that moment, because he had just experienced a feeling he had never felt before. After Nagi finished the thrill rides, Sagawa became worried. She didn't expect Nagi to be so scared of these rides. Next, the two of them went into the maze together. At that moment, Nagi was determined to find Sagawa no matter what. Unexpectedly, when Sagawa appeared from behind, Nagi accidentally kissed her indirectly, because there was a glass barrier between them. But Nagi still felt very embarrassed about it, since he had never experienced this feeling before. As for Saki, she was angry that her brother was dating another girl. Saki was even more surprised that Amano was well aware of this. It turned out that Amano even encouraged Nagi, because she knew that the two could never get married. But Saki was still very angry, because she could not accept this. That indescribable feeling made Saki feel like she was going crazy. So Saki wanted to go out with Amano. It turned out she went to the batting cage just to vent all her anger on the ball. Because Amano could never understand, while Nagi already had a fiancé, he could still date another girl. When Nagi returned home, his younger sister was already waiting there. At that moment, Saki had prepared a meal for Nagi. However, he already sensed that something was wrong, but Nagi still didn't know what was happening. Later, near dawn, while everyone was still asleep, Amino suddenly appeared. It turned out he came to invite his children to go fishing. So everyone agreed to join. However, this was a terrible ordeal for Nagi, because he was already seasick. Therefore, Nagi lost interest in fishing, but he still joined in the fun with everyone, because this was probably a wonderful time for everyone to gather together. The next day, Amano had a lunch appointment with her mother. Since today was Mother's Day, Saki also wanted to do something, because when she left the house, Saki was sure that her mother would be very worried. So at that moment, Saki wanted to do something to help her mother feel at ease while staying here. So the two of them went to the shopping mall together. Unexpectedly, Saki attracted a lot of attention here, because of her beautiful appearance. When it came time to buy things, they didn't know what to choose, since their mothers were workaholics. After a while of browsing, they still couldn't pick a satisfactory item. As for Amano, her mother asked about Nagi's current situation. Unexpectedly, everything was still normal, so Amano's mother felt more at ease. In the afternoon, Saki went home alone, while Amano and Nagi were still out on the street, since today both of them had a plan to go to the library. Unexpectedly, when Saki entered the house, she discovered a strange man. It turned out that it was Soichiro, Amano's father. At first, Saki even thought Soichiro was a thief, so she was startled when she realized the truth. Afterwards, the two of them went to eat at a fancy restaurant. At that moment, Soichiro asked Saki about her thoughts on the relationship between Amano and Nagi. However, Saki realized that their personalities were completely opposite. Unexpectedly, that very thing made them get along incredibly well. Because of this, Soichiro finally felt reassured about the matter. After several days, while it was pouring rain, lightning suddenly struck, causing Amano's house to lose power. Unexpectedly, both she and Nagi were in an awkward situation, as they were in very close contact with each other. At that moment, Nagi intended to find his phone, but because it was too dark, Amano felt very scared being alone there. Therefore, she stayed close to Nagi the entire time. Afterwards, the two of them sat together at the table. At that moment, Amano asked Nagi about his feelings living here. As for Amano, she felt very happy, because after she met Nagi, things kept happening to Amano. But unexpectedly, they were all pleasant events. Nagi experienced the same thing as well. Suddenly, Amano remembered that there was a repair kit outside the door, which could help both of them in this situation. So Nagi quickly went outside. Unexpectedly, at that moment, Saki returned. Due to carelessness, Nagi slipped. Unexpectedly, he accidentally kissed Saki on the cheek. But when the lights came back on, Nagi realized what had happened. Although Saki seemed surprised, Nagi felt the opposite. He felt lucky that it wasn't Amano. The next day, Sachi's behavior was somewhat unusual. Perhaps she was still thinking about yesterday's incident. This preoccupied Saki immensely. When Saki was at home, although Nagi tried hard to call her for lunch, Saki didn't respond at all. She just wanted to sit alone in a corner of the room. When Amano appeared, she couldn't do anything about it, because Amano really didn't know the reason why Saki was acting that way, or why Saki behaved like that. Unexpectedly, Nagi suddenly remembered that yesterday he had accidentally kissed Saki on the cheek. So that was the only reason Saki was acting so strangely. After all, Saki was Nagi's younger sister. But now she was no longer the same. So Nagi later went to Sachi's door to apologize for his careless action the previous day. Unexpectedly, Saki had returned to her normal state, because she fully understood that it was an unintended incident. After several days, unexpectedly, Nagi and Sagawa had become so close. They even went home together after school. Amano, on the other hand, suddenly wanted to go on a date with Nagi. So they had to pretend to be a real couple. At that moment, Nagi didn't know what Amano was plotting. It turned out that previously, when Nagi went out alone with Sagawa, Amano had noticed it, so she seemed jealous. That's why Amano now also wanted to experience this. However, Nagi was a little confused, because Amano had always supported his love life. But now Amano seemed abnormal. Unexpectedly, she didn't even know the reason herself. At that moment, Nagi suddenly thought that perhaps Amano had already liked him. However, Amano immediately denied it, but Nagi clearly sensed that it was her discomfort. It was even jealousy when she saw Nagi being close to Sagawa. Since Amano couldn't say a word, she ran away immediately afterward. The most unexpected moment came when Nagi was sitting alone in the dark, thinking about the events of the afternoon. Suddenly, Nagi's heart raced uncontrollably. This made him think that perhaps he also liked Amano. But immediately afterward, Nagi pushed the thought away, because he already had Sagawa, so he couldn't possibly have feelings for anyone else. However, after thinking about this troublesome matter for a while, Nagi ended up with a headache. Afterwards, having no other choice, Nagi quickly ran to his parents' shop. It turned out he came to ask his father about matters of love. Unexpectedly, his father had fallen in love at first sight with Nagi's mother. Although Nami didn't like it, due to Umino's persistence, the two were eventually able to become a couple. Afterwards, Umino became Nagi's love tutor. However, he didn't gain any results either. After several days, Amano and Saki were extremely exhausted after just finishing a grueling exam. So at that moment, Nagi was preparing a delicious meal for the two of them. The next day, Nagi still had many thoughts on his mind. Because he couldn't focus, Nagi's exam results dropped drastically. Sagawa, on the other hand, continued to lead, and the classmates around used this as an excuse to tease Nagi. So when he returned home, Nagi's mood was far from cheerful. Even Amano and Saki could sense it. Nagi felt that he had become too complacent, because after reaching first place, he then plummeted uncontrollably. This made him very embarrassed. because he had been so confident with Sagawa before. Now he felt that he was no longer the same Nagi as before. Partly because Nagi's life had changed so much that he could no longer focus properly. Afterwards, Amano went up to Nagi's room. It turned out he hadn't cooked for everyone yet. But Nagi was angry because no one understood his feelings at that moment. This even made Saki, standing outside, feel worried, but Amano expressed all her thoughts. She believed that Nagi shouldn't be like this at the moment, because it only made Nagi more exhausted. If he wanted to try, Amano asked him to do well on the next exam. That gradually stabilized Nagi's emotions. So everyone at home happily enjoyed the meal. Because of the earlier reason, Nagi also felt more cheerful now. He was regaining his initial confidence. The next morning, Nagi began a new journey. It seemed he was fully focused on the path ahead. However, at school, Nagi noticed that Sagawa seemed to be avoiding him. This made it hard for Nagi to accept the truth. Unexpectedly, he later received a letter. It was from Sagawa, and she asked Nagi to meet her on the rooftop after school. After a while, Nagi told Amano about this. She was certain that something wasn't right. Perhaps Sagawa was feeling disappointed because of Nagi's current ranking. So now he didn't know what to do. Unexpectedly, Sagawa was witnessing their conversation. Finally, Sagawa and Nagi met. However, at first, Sagawa didn't say anything. Afterwards, she passed the ball to Nagi. So naturally, the two of them played basketball together. At that moment, Sagawa shared her thoughts. At first, she had felt a little disappointed. But since Sagawa was Nagi's rival, she understood better than anyone else. However, Sagawa was surprised that Nagi seemed cheerful again this morning. And she knew that it was exactly thanks to Amano. This made Sagawa feel a little let down, because she had thought that only she could make Nagi happy. Unexpectedly, at this moment, Nagi realized that he truly liked Sagawa. As for Amano, her academic performance wasn't much better. So Nagi decided to tutor Amano. However, this proved to be more difficult than he had imagined, because Amano refused to focus on studying. Even after 3 hours of studying, Amano still didn't retain anything, which left Nagi completely helpless. It turned out that he had tried so hard to prevent Amano from having to leave this house. Since her studies were not yielding good results, Amano's father decided to take her back home. But unexpectedly, this time Amano was extremely determined, although she had previously found it difficult to concentrate properly. Later, Nagi learned about this because Saki had told him, so he immediately went up to Amano's room. At that moment, Nagi became angry, because Amano basically didn't know how to study correctly. Unexpectedly, Nagi shared valuable knowledge again, so that Amano could understand the purpose of studying. At that moment, she understood it even better. Because of this, Amano became much more motivated. After several days, with Amano's diligence at home and her improvement in class, her retest results were very good. Both she and Nagi were happy because they had achieved the success that Amano had worked hard to attain before. Unexpectedly, she was also very grateful to Nagi, because thanks to him, Amano was able to get these results. After several more days, near Sachi's parents' house, a special festival was being held, so everyone gathered to have fun. Both sets of parents went to greet the people around the neighborhood, while the two siblings stayed behind to sell food to earn money for the family. However, Nagi's expression showed no happiness at all, because even though it was a holiday, Nagi didn't have any private time to study at home. Suddenly, Sagawa approached them. He didn't expect Sagawa to appear here as well, so Nagi's mood gradually became cheerful again. However, Saki didn't feel happy, because Nagi seemed close to this unfamiliar girl. Finally, Amano also arrived here. While they were walking together, Amano saw Sagawa. Unexpectedly, Amano didn't hesitate. She introduced her younger sister to Sagawa. After a while, Amano had the chance to go out with Nagi, while Saki had to stay home to help their parents. Even so, she felt happy about this. At that moment, Amano enjoyed playing with Nagi, so the two were fully enjoying this time together. However, everyone around noticed Amano, because she was so famous. People there were extremely surprised. Afterwards, Amano became fully absorbed in the games, while Nagi, being hungry, walked around to look for food. Unexpectedly, here Nagi ran into Saki, and also some of her school friends. Unexpectedly, as soon as Sachi's friends saw him, they immediately mocked Nagi, because at school, Saki always said that her brother was a bookworm, and that Nagi was very hard to approach. However, Saki only wanted herself to say these things. She didn't want anyone else to talk about Nagi like that. Unexpectedly, he was behind them and heard everything. After a while, Nagi went to Amano's side to eat together. But the group following them didn't leave them alone, because they noticed Amano was there too. The whole group tried to take Amano away from Nagi. Unexpectedly, Nagi just held Amano's hand and ran. But this very action of Nagi made Amano feel very strange emotions. At the same time, she didn't understand why Nagi had to run away. It turned out that Nagi didn't want to do anything that would attract attention. Since Amano was there, if Nagi fought right then, Amano would definitely get into trouble. Unexpectedly, moments like this made Amano very happy. She might even never forget this precious time. Afterwards, Sagawa also appeared with them, because she had a question. Since both Amano and Nagi said Saki was Nagi's sister, Sagawa felt a little confused. So the two of them became hesitant at that moment. Unexpectedly, Amano then grabbed Nagi's hand and ran. Amano really didn't know what to do. Nagi thought the only way was to tell the truth to Sagawa. Because at this moment, the two of them could no longer cover it up. And Sagawa was truly very surprised by that secret. Finally, Sagawa was able to resolve the question she had earlier. Unexpectedly, it was this reason that allowed Amano to become closer to Sagawa. And Sagawa promised that she would definitely keep this secret for them. But unexpectedly, Sagawa was very jealous of the two of them, because they had such a cute younger sister, Saki. On the way home, Amano suddenly remembered that she had promised Saki a gift earlier. But at that moment, Amano still hadn't bought it, so she quickly went back to buy some things. However, Amano seemed to have bought too many things, which even surprised Saki with so many items like this. The next morning, both Saki and Amano unexpectedly followed Sagawa. However, neither of them had a specific reason for this action. Unexpectedly, after observing Sagawa, they found that she really was a perfect person. Even Saki felt jealous of Sagawa herself. It turned out that the reason they did this was because earlier, Saki saw Sagawa seemed close to Nagi. So Saki wanted to find out what kind of person Sagawa was. But it seemed Saki felt disappointed, because Sagawa was an extremely kind girl. Even Amano agreed with this. When she first transferred schools, only Sagawa truly wanted to be friends with Amano. She treated everyone equally. Previously, Amano had made friends with many people, but they only took advantage of her. This also greatly surprised Amano. Not only did Sagawa excel academically, but she was also good at sports. So Sagawa was truly a person approaching perfection. However, Saki felt even more upset at this moment, because Amano sided with Sagawa. At that moment, Saki suddenly ran away. It turned out she went home to see Nagi. Saki unexpectedly became angry, because someone like Nagi could never reach Sagawa. Even more surprisingly, Saki at that moment decided that she would apply to the same school everyone was attending. Unexpectedly, Amano was very excited about Sachi's decision, because she wanted both of them to attend school together. However, Nagi couldn't feel at ease about this younger sister. After several days, Saki came to visit Nagi's school. She attracted a lot of attention from everyone, because of Sachi's outstanding appearance that day. And this also made Nagi very worried, because he feared Saki would get into trouble while here. However, Nagi seemed a little less worried when he saw that Sachi's guide was Sagawa. But Nagi later felt uneasy, because he was afraid Saki might reveal some embarrassing things about him. So at that moment, Nagi had no choice but to follow them. However, he didn't hear anything. Therefore, Nagi ran over to them, because he was curious about Saki and Sagawa's story. But Saki didn't want to reveal this to Nagi. Suddenly, someone noticed Nagi, which shocked them and made them extremely jealous, because Nagi was currently having lunch with 3 cute girls. When they returned home, Saki continued to study diligently. It seemed she was very determined to enter her dream school. The next day, Amano invited Saki to go camping. It turned out she had an upcoming exam, so Amano decided to combine studying with camping over the weekend. This made Saki extremely excited, because she would get to join everyone. So the day of their outing finally arrived. Unexpectedly, Asuma also participated. However, Saki got sick before the trip, so she couldn't join this outing. And Amano also felt regretful because she knew that Saki had been very eager to participate in it. In the end, it was only the four of them, just like before, but this time, everyone would focus on achieving good results in the exam. Amano thought that, first of all, everyone needed to go to the market to prepare properly for the following days. However, only Amano and Asuma went together. Meanwhile, Sagawa and Nagi, while waiting for them, went to a nearby lake to enjoy the scenery. Unexpectedly, Nagi really enjoyed immersing himself in nature. During that time, he was curious about Sagawa, wondering why she wanted to join this camping trip. But Sagawa's simple reason surprised Nagi. It was because Nagi was going. So Sagawa decided to go along. As for Amano, she didn't know what to buy, because until now, it had always been Saki and Nagi's responsibility. When everyone returned, Asuma unexpectedly informed Nagi that he had officially confessed to Amano. However, from what Asuma shared, Nagi knew well that it wasn't a real confession. Unexpectedly, he then also revealed that Nagi had once confessed to Sagawa. However, things didn't work out, which caused Nagi to keep thinking about it ever since. But Asuma was also very surprised by Nagi's impressive confession from before. Afterwards, Asuma didn't study with the group. Instead, he went outside to buy ice cream. When night fell, everyone decided to test their courage. So they decided to go into the deep forest. Unexpectedly, Amano grabbed Nagi's hand, and suddenly ran inside. It turned out that Amano had something she wanted to tell Nagi. Meanwhile, Sagawa was left bewildered, staying alone with Asuma. Unexpectedly, she learned that Asuma had confessed to Amano beforehand. As for Amano, she was about to talk to Nagi, when Nagi suddenly disappeared, causing Amano to feel a bit scared, because being alone in such a desolate place was enough to unsettle her. Unexpectedly, Nagi played a trick to scare her, and he successfully did so, leaving Amano extremely flustered. Afterwards, the two of them also reached the shrine, which had been the target destination from the start. At this moment, Amano quickly took a photo. She sent it to Sagawa to report that the task was completed. However, when it was Sagawa's turn, she unexpectedly gave up, so everyone later gathered together to cook. Of course, Nagi was in charge of this task. After a while, everyone seemed to enjoy the food very much. Unexpectedly, this made everyone so happy. Afterwards, Nagi had the chance to be alone with Sagawa. At this moment, Sagawa realized that Nagi must be very happy about this, because Sagawa could see that Nagi had smiled a lot before. He seemed happier than usual. So Nagi also realized at this time that he was truly enjoying this moment. Next, Nagi invited everyone to go stargazing, which made them extremely surprised by the scene before their eyes. Suddenly, Nagi received a message from his mother. Although she had been forbidden by Saki from revealing it, Nagi's mother still tried to tell him that Sachi's illness was getting worse. So she was currently in the hospital for observation. Unexpectedly, after hearing this news, Nagi immediately rushed to Sachi's side. Even the people around didn't have time to notice. But this also caused Saki to feel uncomfortable, because Nagi left everyone behind just to come here. When Amano returned, Nagi immediately apologized for his actions the previous day. Unexpectedly, Amano didn't blame him at all. Instead, Amano admired Nagi even more because he was someone who truly cared about others. But this made Nagi think deeply. He didn't understand the meaning behind Amano's words. In fact, Nagi even felt embarrassed at the moment. However, he really didn't know why. On another day, Nagi accidentally discovered a photo of himself and Amano when they were children. It turned out they had known each other since they were young. However, this was just Nagi's imagination, because the boy in the photo was actually his older brother. Unexpectedly, Nagi had no reaction at all, which made Amano angry because Nagi didn't seem to care about anything. Even more surprising, Amano's parents didn't know about this. However, everyone seemed to pretend that her older brother didn't exist. Meanwhile, Amano still waited for him to return day by day. At this time, Amano recounted an event from a few months ago, when her parents forced her into an arranged marriage. But Amano didn't agree, and so she ran away from home. By chance, that was also the time when Amano first met Nagi. Amano was surprised by Nagi's appearance. He looked very similar to Amano's older brother. However, after all that time, Amano still hadn't found her older brother. So Nagi decided that the best thing for them was to act immediately. Meanwhile, Saki returned to join everyone, which made Amano very happy. As for Nagi, he was still thinking about Sosuke, the older brother whose identity was unclear to Nagi. As Nagi reflected, he always felt that something was strange about Amano ever since they first started meeting. At this moment, Nagi kept recalling Amano's unusual actions. Unexpectedly, Nagi suddenly realized that perhaps he was only a substitute for Amano's older brother. Initially, Amano treated Nagi very kindly, which made him think that the two of them were engaged, and that's why Amano behaved that way. A little later, Nagi intended to meet Amano's father because he had some questions he needed answered. It turned out Nagi wanted to ask about Sosuke's identity and why he had left in such a way. Despite Amano trying her best to stop him, Nagi continued to move forward anyway. Meanwhile, Saki was still wondering about the events that had just occurred, so Amano later explained everything clearly. To her surprise, Saki also understood the issue. She couldn't believe that Amano also had a brother. That meant Nagi had always had a brother from before. Unexpectedly, both girls shared so many similarities, especially when they had to live with inattentive older brothers. However, Saki also hoped to soon find Sosuke, because she really wanted to meet him. As for Nagi, he wanted to ask about the identity of his older brother. However, Soichiro refused to reveal anything. He only kept showing Nagi pictures of Amano when she was little. Because Soichiro always told Nagi that the person he mentioned never actually existed. Afterwards, Nagi had no choice but to go home, while having no other information. Indeed, Amano's words were true. Their father didn't care about this matter at all. However, Nagi was still very persistent in trying to learn about Sosuke's identity. But he surely couldn't ask anything further from his father. So at that moment, Nagi had no way left. Suddenly, he received a message from Sagawa, which made Nagi extremely happy. It felt as if he was on a date with Sagawa. Afterwards, the two of them rode bicycles together. Suddenly, Sagawa posed a riddle, but Nagi had no idea what the answer was. However, Sagawa refused to reveal it immediately. Then she began to run off. On the way, Nagi tried to chase after Sagawa. He suddenly discovered another hotel. Unexpectedly, this place also belonged to Soichiro. But up to now, Nagi still couldn't believe that his biological father was so wealthy. After a while, the two of them arrived at their destination. It turned out that this was an incredibly cool and relaxing place. Because Sagawa knew that Nagi hadn't been feeling comfortable lately, as he had been through so many events. So this was also an opportunity for Nagi to feel as relaxed as possible. At that moment, the two of them began to shout loudly at the sea. This could make them feel the most refreshed. As for Saki, unexpectedly, she was on a meeting with Soichiro. Here, he asked Saki a question that she could never forget. It was whether Saki was ready to marry Nagi. When Saki finally got home, Nagi sensed something strange from her. However, Nagi didn't know exactly what it was. Afterwards, the two of them went to the supermarket together to buy groceries. It had been a long time since they had been like this. Because Saki suddenly remembered memories from her childhood. When everyone got back home, Nagi had already finished preparing the meal. So everyone just needed to wait for Amano to come back, and it would be complete. In the meantime, Saki found a game to kill time. Suddenly, Saki unexpectedly asked Nagi, "If I were to ask us to get married, would you agree?" However, Nagi didn't know how to answer, since Saki was his little sister, and they had even lived together for 16 years. This was impossible for Nagi. Regarding Nagi's studies, he had made remarkable progress. Although last month he was only ranked 13th, Nagi had worked hard to break free. As a result, he successfully climbed out of the pit of despair. And then Nagi soared high like a phoenix. Meanwhile, Sagawa had dropped to second place. So Nagi took this opportunity to plan to confess his feelings once again. Afterwards, on the rooftop, at this moment, the two of them finally met. First of all, Sagawa congratulated Nagi. She thought of Nagi as a phoenix, because he had spectacularly risen from rank 13 to first place. Unexpectedly, Asuma was lurking behind, eavesdropping on them. As for Nagi, he didn't beat around the bush at all. Because at this moment, he had started confessing to Sagawa once again. Although she smiled, Sagawa still didn't agree. Nevertheless, it felt as if fate was about to change. She didn't expect things to turn out this way. Sagawa thought, if only my fiancé were Nagi. When night fell, Nagi announced shocking news from school, which left Saki and Amano extremely surprised. Amano couldn't believe this could happen. However, Saki was still doubtful, because Sagawa hadn't mentioned anything about liking Nagi. So Amano came up with a way to verify Sagawa's words. Therefore, Amano made a plan. Everyone would go to the beach together. And Amano, along with Saki, would observe Sagawa to see how she truly felt. At first, Nagi refused to go along. But when he learned that Sagawa would also be going, Nagi immediately agreed. The next day, Amano went shopping to prepare for the upcoming vacation. Nagi went along with Amano. But he didn't buy anything useful, causing Amano to constantly refuse those items. Afterwards, the two of them headed home together. On the bus, Amano shared. Although Sagawa knew they were engaged, she had no idea that Amano and Nagi had been living together. If Sagawa found out about this, Amano feared it would be a disaster, and that Sagawa might get angry at both of them. Unexpectedly, when Amano and Nagi arrived home, Sagawa was already there. It turned out she had been invited earlier by Saki. So Sagawa now knew their secret. Surprisingly, not only did she not get angry, but Sagawa also understood their situation. The next morning, everyone went to the beach to enjoy the vacation. However, Nagi refused to join the girls. After a while, he finally had a chance to be alone with Sagawa. But Nagi still felt guilty towards Sagawa, because he had kept the secret about living with Amano. However, the noteworthy thing was that Nagi genuinely liked it. It seemed he enjoyed every moment of being with Amano. This made Sagawa appear unhappy. She was truly in pain. In fact, Sagawa even considered not joining this trip. So she stepped forward to pull Nagi's hair, as if using it to curse him if he dared to repeat such a thing again. This meant that Sagawa had probably forgiven Nagi. As a result, Nagi felt extremely good afterward. And Amano didn't expect that Sagawa had actually developed feelings for Nagi. Unexpectedly, later Nagi had a question for Saki, because he thought Saki liked him. However, this was something Sagawa had told Nagi before, so he really wanted to clarify it now. But Saki immediately denied it. Afterwards, she ran to Sagawa to talk, because Saki didn't understand why Sagawa had said that. It turned out Sagawa had simply spoken whatever was on her mind. As for Nagi, he thought the bath was empty, so he comfortably relaxed and enjoyed it. Unexpectedly, Amano appeared after a while. This surprised Nagi greatly. In fact, Amano even got into the bath with him. Because of this, Nagi thought that Amano was trying to get close to him. However, if Sagawa were to see this scene, Nagi would truly be doomed. When night fell, everyone was surprised to find that the room had only 2 beds. Yet there were 4 people sleeping here. Afterwards, Sagawa came up with a way to draw lots. Unexpectedly, Saki ended up sleeping with Nagi. Not only that, but the two also had unnecessary arguments. As for Sagawa's group, she chatted with Amano all night. So Amano learned that both of them were being forced into marriage by their parents. However, Sagawa still hadn't met the person her parents wanted her to marry, which surprised Amano a little. Afterwards, everyone fell asleep. The next morning, Amano was sitting on a chair, and Nagi had just woken up. Unexpectedly, Amano suddenly remembered that when she was little, she had definitely been here with Sosuke. Because of this, Nagi thought I could find many clues from this incident. So Nagi called everyone to wake up. Afterwards, Amano retrieved the old game console from the past. Unexpectedly, someone had used it 3 days ago. This meant that someone had been in the house. However, only Amano's family was allowed to stay there, and her parents never touched this game console. There was only one possible case left. It had to be Sosuke. So Nagi decided to run off to find him, thinking that Sosuke might still be here. But Amano unexpectedly followed to stop Nagi. It turned out she was feeling scared, because she was about to meet the person she had always wanted to see for so long. Amano suddenly didn't know what it would be like. Unexpectedly, Nagi assured her that he would stay right by Amano's side when she finally met her older brother. Therefore, the two of them went searching everywhere, but they still couldn't find him. However, Amano's mood remained stable, because she had Nagi beside her to help. After a while, it was time for everyone to return home. However, Sagawa pulled Nagi aside, because she had something to do with him. It turned out Sagawa wanted to go with Nagi to a famous nearby shrine. But unexpectedly, it had already been closed. Afterwards, the two of them went through a heavy rain. So at this moment, Nagi and Sagawa had no choice but to wait here. And the two of them would spend the night at a small inn. But until now, Nagi was extremely shocked, because he never expected that the two of them would stay together like this. Sagawa even lied to the inn owner, saying that the two of them were a newlywed couple. This made Nagi even more surprised. He didn't think Sagawa was the type of person like that. However, a more shocking incident happened a while later. The two of them accidentally ended up lying on top of each other. It all started because Sagawa initially slipped. Thus, their awkward situation began from there. As for Saki at home, she didn't feel comfortable at all, because after hearing that they would spend the night together, the police suddenly showed up a while later. It turned out that Sagawa had falsified her age. Nagi was extremely nervous. He was afraid he might be expelled from school just because of this. But when the police opened the door, it turned out to be Saki and Amano. They came to see how Nagi was doing, and it shocked both of them greatly when they saw Nagi wasn't wearing anything. Many days later, on Nagi's father's birthday, he invited everyone over to celebrate. However, Nagi and Saki weren't interested in it at all. Only Amano was excited to join. Afterwards, everyone enjoyed the meal together. Amano also got to see some childhood photos of the family. Nagi looked almost the same then and now. Unexpectedly, Amino is only 36 years old this year. So Nagi immediately guessed that the birth of his parents' first child could only have been an accident between the two of them. And the person here could only be Amano. However, she wasn't upset at all. On the contrary, Amano even felt truly special. Even Saki was at a loss with Amano's optimism. Afterwards, Saki became curious about Amano's birthday. She was suddenly surprised because Amano's birthday coincided with Nagi's. But that was natural, because the two of them had met for the first time right after birth. And they had even been swapped due to an accident by the nurse back then. Afterwards, their mother also appeared. She was very happy that everything in the present was fine, because everything had almost returned to normal after quite a lot had happened between them in the past. Thus, the birthday party came to an end, so the three of them quickly went back home. Many days later, while everyone was studying in a group, Amano suddenly collapsed to the ground. Because of this, everyone was very worried about her. Nagi intended to go into the room to take care of Amano, but he was chased out by Saki. Because Nagi was truly inconsiderate. It turned out that whenever a girl is sick, the boy is not allowed to enter the room. Meanwhile, Amano unexpectedly apologized to everyone. Because of her, Saki and Sagawa had been troubled. However, that was only Amano's own thinking. And Saki, along with Sagawa, would try their best to take care of Amano. Sagawa even created a whole campaign just to do this. However, Sagawa's way of caring was a bit unusual. She didn't expect Sagawa to give Amano a large bottle of alcohol, because she thought this type of alcohol would have many benefits. It would surely help Amano recover quickly. However, Amano's condition didn't improve much at this time, so everyone became even more worried about her than before. Unexpectedly, Nagi couldn't just sit still either. He stood up to cook food for Amano. Because Nagi hoped that after Amano, then her health condition would improve somewhat. Unexpectedly, Amano finished it in an instant. By the time Amano recovered, it was already getting dark. So Sagawa had no choice but to go home. Afterwards, Amano and Nagi received a letter. It turned out to be a birthday photo from their father. Amano was unexpectedly very happy about this. At present, she felt like a part of everyone's family. And Amano also wondered whether she could have a family like this in the future. But for Nagi, he thought that it depended entirely on Amano herself. However, when the two of them spent time together, they continued to have small conflicts, causing frequent heated arguments between them. One day, many years ago, an accident occurred between two babies who were switched at birth. Nagi was the son of a poor family who owned a small diner. His family was not well off. The other child, however, had a completely different fate. Amano was the daughter of a wealthy hotel tycoon, and destiny between them continued 17 years later. The two met again and learned that they were even engaged to each other. However, Nagi already had a one-sided love at school for Sagawa. Unexpectedly, he also had another complicated emotional relationship. It turned out that person was Saki, and she was also Nagi's non-blood related younger sister. At this point, yet another mysterious girl appeared. It was predicted that this girl would also cause Nagi plenty of trouble. As for Sagawa, because her parents forced her to marry a stranger she didn't know, Sagawa decided to run away from home. Unexpectedly, the place she wanted to go was exactly where Nagi and Amano were living. However, Sagawa's actions this time were far too extreme. Even Amano and Saki were shocked about it, since Amano had always thought Sagawa was an honor student, someone extremely gentle and innocent. But everything now went against Amano's expectations, so she couldn't help but be shocked. As for Nagi, although he fully supported Sagawa's decision, without her parents' approval, Nagi felt that this situation wasn't right at all. Meanwhile, Amano was overjoyed to be able to live together with Sagawa, so she didn't think deeply about the consequences. However, Saki didn't want this to happen, because if Sagawa moved in with everyone, it would be difficult to arrange rooms for everyone. Their current house only had 2 rooms. Amano and Saki had already been sharing one room. Nagi then wondered to himself, if he shared a room with Sagawa, it wouldn't be appropriate at all. But for Sagawa, this wasn't a big problem, since the two had already had a chance to stay together once before. But Saki immediately protested, because all 3 of them had their own fiancés. So Saki insisted she must be the only one sharing a room with Nagi. Because of this problem, everyone kept thinking until late at night. In the end, Nagi concluded he would stay in a room by himself, and the girls should learn to get along and live together. However, Nagi's plan failed completely. None of the 3 girls agreed, so Nagi had no choice but to temporarily live in the storage room. Meanwhile, Sagawa would sleep in his room. Nagi decided to endure it until Sagawa returned home eventually. However, Nagi suddenly felt extremely nervous, because he imagined Sagawa sleeping on his own bed. This gave him a very strange feeling. While he was thinking about this, Amano suddenly appeared, startling Nagi. It turned out Amano came because she was still shocked by Sagawa suddenly moving in with them. So Amano still couldn't fully understand the situation. Although Nagi was excited about it, Amano felt it was unrealistic, because when living together, everyone would reveal their bad sides. Unexpectedly, Nagi confidently declared that he would never be disappointed even if he saw something unflattering about Sagawa in the future. However, Amano understood Sagawa's situation, because she herself had once been in a similar position. But when Amano reconsidered everything, she realized the situation wasn't actually that terrible. Even though Amano's biological parents said it was fine if she and Nagi didn't get married, Amano knew that if they wanted both families to be happy, then her marriage with Nagi needed to happen. Nagi was surprised when he heard Amano bring this up, but she said she was just thinking about it by coincidence. Nagi then intended to refuse the idea, which made Amano immediately angry. She stormed out of the storage room right away. However, sometime later, Nagi began thinking more about the matter, because he had never seriously thought about marriage before. Nagi wonders whether his parents would be happy if he were to marry Sagawa. But even he himself has no idea how things will turn out. The next morning, when Nagi slowly walked downstairs, he was immediately surprised because he saw Sagawa preparing breakfast. Nagi tried to help, but she instantly stopped him, so he had no choice but to sit and wait for Sagawa to finish. Nagi felt extremely excited inside at that moment, because he never expected there would be a day he could taste food cooked by Sagawa. After that, Amano and Saki also arrived. At that moment, they seemed to misunderstand Nagi, because they saw Sagawa busy working, while Nagi just sat there waiting. So Amano became angry. Unexpectedly, Nagi had something he wanted to say to the 2 girls. It turned out he wanted to divide the housework equally, because Nagi was afraid it would trouble Sagawa. It seemed he was very serious about this plan. Even Amano and Saki didn't dare give any opinion. After that, everyone began to act. However, the 2 girls still weren't used to doing these things. so Amano was a bit clumsy for the first time. Meanwhile, Sagawa remained passionate about making breakfast. However, even by noon, she still hadn't finished, making everyone in the house unable to bear it anymore because they were starving. So Nagi had no choice but to take action. He showed off his cooking skills, surprising the girls. Amano didn't expect the food to taste that good. The other two girls also admired Nagi's cooking talent. However, Nagi suddenly shed strange tears. Even he himself didn't know why it happened. Even after the meal ended, Nagi still felt troubled, because he didn't understand why he cried like that earlier. At that moment, Amano was watering the plants outside, and she accidentally overheard Nagi's inner thoughts. Not only that, Amano even understood the real reason he cried. It could only be because Nagi was feeling happy. And indeed, that was the case. When Nagi was together with the three girls, he felt everything was wonderful. These joyful moments were something Nagi knew he would always remember. The next morning, before Saki left for school, she sat together with her older brother. At that moment, Saki was curious about Nagi's marriage situation. It turned out she wanted Nagi to give up on Sagawa, because Nagi already had a fiancé, Amano. And Amano was also Sachi's biological sister. So what Saki meant was advising Nagi to think carefully. Because if anything went wrong, it would definitely affect many people. While the siblings were talking, Amano suddenly ran over in a panic. It turned out she had something serious to announce. Amano thought that Sagawa might have been kidnapped, because while she was on her way home, Amano happened to see Sagawa, and there were also several mysterious people following her. Sagawa even slowly got into their car and left, which terrified Amano, because she thought Sagawa had been taken away. However, the person sitting in the front seat was actually her mother. So Saki thought this wasn't a kidnapping at all, because Sagawa had run away from home before. But she never contacted her family about it. That was the reason her mother came today to bring her back. Suddenly, Saki remembered that Sagawa might be going to meet her own fiancé today. So her parents forced her to return home. At that moment, Nagi suddenly came up with a special plan. It turned out he wanted everyone to overturn the situation, because all three of them were stuck in similar predicaments. But Amano carefully warned Nagi, since his actions might change Sagawa's entire fate. However, Nagi still remained determined with his choice. So he immediately went to her house to meet Sagawa. At that moment, Sagawa instantly noticed Nagi, leaving her completely shocked. However, Nagi stayed serious about his plan, and suddenly grabbed Sagawa's hand. At that moment, Nagi affirmed that destiny is something one must create by oneself. After that, Nagi recalled the memory of the very first day the two of them met. Back then, he was completely shocked when he heard he had dropped in rank. Because Nagi had always been the top student for 15 years. So he simply could not accept such a thing. And the one who took first place was none other than Sagawa. At that time, Nagi was stunned to know he had been beaten by a girl. Unexpectedly, the results of the following exams were exactly the same, leaving Nagi extremely annoyed, so he stayed home, fully determined to focus and defeat his rival. But when the results came out, Nagi felt disappointed, because his rank didn't change at all. However, Nagi happened to discover something while he was in the infirmary. Even though Sagawa was sick, she was still extremely determined to continue studying. Sagawa even worked much harder than he did. That was why Sagawa always achieved good ranks. Even Nagi eventually began to admire her, because perhaps Sagawa had worked incredibly hard behind the scenes. If Nagi were in the same situation, he wasn't sure whether he could do what Sagawa did. However, Sagawa seemed uncomfortable when Nagi suddenly approached her like that. So Sagawa angrily told him that she didn't want them to speak to each other ever again, leaving Nagi confused, not knowing why she acted that way. And from that day on, Sagawa's personality changed. Even her friends and Nagi were surprised, because Sagawa had become completely different from before. It seemed Nagi had truly fallen for her at that very moment. Returning to the present, after Nagi grabbed Sagawa's hand and ran away with her, she was completely shocked by his action. Meanwhile, Saki, on her way back from school, met an old childhood friend. That girl's name was Mochizuki. After that, the two of them went home to greet Sachi's parents, because Mochizuki hadn't returned to visit everyone for a long time, since she had been living with her family in China. But now Mochizuki wanted to return to Japan and live independently. Meanwhile, Nagi was having dinner with Sagawa. However, since neither of them had money, they had to eat bread for now. They even shared the same piece together. But this made Nagi blush, because he had never experienced something like that before. A moment later, when Nagi calmed down, he suddenly became curious about their past. Did Sagawa still remember the time she got angry at school? Clearly, she still remembered it. Unexpectedly, Sagawa then shared a few things with Nagi. It turned out she studied so hard in order to have a reason to reject her fiancé. But when Nagi appeared in her life, the reason she suddenly changed like that was because Sagawa didn't want someone like Nagi to get close to her anymore. However, this truth broke Nagi's heart. He finally understood everything was simply to avoid him. But surprisingly, Nagi kept approaching Sagawa anyway. And unexpectedly, she later felt that it wasn't so bad after all. From the moment Nagi confessed to her so suddenly, Sagawa thought that her destiny might have changed at that very moment. Suddenly, Amano appeared out of nowhere, leaving both of them completely shocked. It turned out Amano came to bring them back to Sagawa's house. Because Amano wanted Nagi to apologize to Sagawa's family, since he had acted improperly earlier that morning. But when Amano introduced herself as Nagi's fiancé, Sagawa's mother, Asami, was utterly stunned. After that, Amano shared her own circumstances. She too had experienced something similar to what Sagawa was going through. Things were so bad that Amano no longer wanted to speak with her parents. But after some time, Amano suddenly realized it wasn't that she refused to resist. She was just trying to run away from everything. As for Asami, she believed everything she had done was for Sagawa's own good, because Asami simply wanted to see her daughter happy. But at that moment, Asami began rethinking things. Maybe her actions weren't necessarily the right choice after all. They should have talked to each other more, so that both mother and daughter could truly understand one another's feelings. After that, things became much better, and Amano was the one who contributed the most to resolving everything. So Sagawa thanked her deeply. She even took the initiative to hug Amano to express her gratitude. It was truly fortunate that Amano was there. Otherwise, Sagawa might have faced something far worse. As for Mochizuki, she wanted Saki to take her to Nagi's current place so she could greet him. At that moment, Saki suddenly remembered that before Mochizuki left Japan 7 years ago, she had confessed her feelings to Nagi. Unexpectedly, Mochizuki still remembered that after all these years, and she was still very serious about it. When the two of them finally met again, this was exactly what surprised Nagi the most. Mochizuki even brought up her confession from 7 years ago. But Nagi felt embarrassed. However, that was all in the past. So Nagi didn't want to bring it up anymore, because now, he already liked Sagawa. However, Mochizuki suddenly reacted strongly, and she revealed the real reason for her return this time. Mochizuki came back because she wanted to marry Nagi. This decision left everyone completely shocked, because during the time Mochizuki was preparing to leave Japan, she confessed her feelings to Nagi. But it wasn't until the two of them met again that Mochizuki wanted to hear Nagi's answer. And now, Mochizuki had waited long enough for it, since she had finally said everything she had kept in her heart. Mochizuki then turned around and went home. Meanwhile, Nagi still couldn't process what had happened, because everything was happening too fast. It made Nagi unable to fully comprehend it. After that, he decided to chase after Mochizuki, because Nagi wanted to give her a proper answer. He then gave Mochizuki a sincere thank you, because she had spent so many years thinking about him. However, Nagi now already had someone he liked, so he had no choice but to reject Mochizuki's confession from 7 years ago. Unexpectedly, after being rejected by Nagi, Mochizuki showed no negative reaction at all. Even Nagi was surprised by this. After that, Mochizuki asked if Nagi could walk her home, and so the two went together. But a moment later, Mochizuki suddenly stared straight into Nagi's eyes, and he could only stand still, because Nagi had no idea what he was supposed to do next. However, the strong look in his eyes made Mochizuki's heart waver. While they were heading home, Mochizuki suddenly remembered the old bakery, a place filled with memories from when they were kids. So Mochizuki wanted to visit it, and Nagi was also feeling nostalgic. But when they arrived, they were both shocked, because the old bakery had been turned into a convenience store. Although a long time had passed, and both Nagi and Mochizuki had changed, she still wanted to reclaim the place she once held in his heart. Mochizuki was determined to win Nagi over, because he was a precious friend to her. After that, Nagi returned to his parents' house, and he shared with Amino everything that had just happened. This made his father furious, because Amino saw his son getting involved with another girl, even though Nagi already had a fiancé. The two of them then got into a heated argument, and only when Nagi's mother appeared did they stop fighting. A while later, Nagi finally returned home. However, Amano wondered why he came back so late, but then she slapped Nagi, because Amano also thought he was some kind of confession addict. It turned out she misunderstood that even though Nagi liked Sagawa, he also wanted to marry Mochizuki at the same time. Unexpectedly, Amano then had to apologize to Nagi, because she had wrongly accused him. Since nothing was actually like what Amano had imagined, she still wondered who Nagi truly liked. But Nagi suddenly asked her back whether she had ever liked anyone before. To his surprise, Amano became flustered, because she had only attended an all-girls school in the past. So she never experienced anything like this. That's why she didn't know how to answer. Suddenly, Amano ran off to get some fireworks, which Sagawa had bought when she first moved here, for everyone to enjoy together. Nagi then felt regretful because Sagawa wasn't here. After that, Amano seemed to judge Nagi, because Sagawa and Mochizuki were completely different. Yet Nagi liked both of them. But to Nagi, Mochizuki was his close childhood neighbor, while Sagawa was his rival at school, and Nagi couldn't control who he fell for, so he had no clear explanation. Therefore, Amano said Nagi was too easygoing, since he could like almost anyone he talked to. Although Nagi felt a bit embarrassed, he still couldn't deny it. Unexpectedly, Amano also thought that in the future, Nagi might even end up liking her too. Even more surprising was that Nagi believed it could actually happen. Many days later, Saki had something to do, so she dressed up extremely cute. Even Amano found her unbelievably adorable. It turned out Saki had plans to go out with a friend. Curious, the two decided to follow her. They didn't expect Sachi's friend to be a boy. Suddenly, Saki turned around because she felt something was off. Nagi and Amano quickly hid behind a wall. Unexpectedly, the two ended up pressed tightly against each other, which made Amano feel a little embarrassed, while Nagi just wished time would pass faster so he could continue watching what Saki was doing. However, Nagi suddenly became angry because he saw his little sister happily talking to another boy. So Nagi seemed to be jealous, but in reality, he was worried in his role as an older brother. When night fell, the atmosphere between Saki and that boy became romantic. Even Amano couldn't stand it anymore. Suddenly, Saki looked toward Amano and Nagi. It turned out she had noticed them long ago. So Saki revealed that she was dating that boy. This shocked Nagi, who strongly disagreed. However, Saki didn't care at all. She then decided to walk away. But Nagi kept thinking about it endlessly. He was so distracted that he crossed the street without looking, and Nagi got hit by someone. Unexpectedly, it was Sagawa, so the two ended up having a chance to go out together. Nagi then told her that Saki had a boyfriend, but Sagawa didn't react at all, though she clearly knew Nagi was upset. Yet Nagi kept denying it, which only made Sagawa more suspicious. So Nagi finally admitted he didn't feel happy about it. After that, Nagi walked home alone. When he reached Amano's door, Nagi realized Sachi's feelings had gone too far. So he reacted strongly, leaving both girls completely confused. But Nagi had misunderstood, because the two girls were talking about something else completely unrelated to Sachi's love life. This made Nagi extremely embarrassed. The next morning, Mochizuki suddenly came to Amano's house very early. She then began doing all sorts of strange things, until Amano announced to everyone that she would officially marry Nagi. This shocked Nagi, because he himself didn't understand what was going on. It turned out Mochizuki had learned that Amano was Nagi's fiancé, so she wanted to challenge her directly. If Mochizuki won, she wanted Amano to give Nagi up to her, but Nagi suddenly interrupted her, because neither he nor Amano had the right to decide. The decision belonged to both families' parents. However, Amano accepted Mochizuki's challenge anyway, even though Nagi tried to stop her but failed. The reason was that Amano didn't want Mochizuki following her around like that. Mochizuki then led everyone to the place of competition. Unexpectedly, the thing they would compete in was a dart throwing match. At first, Mochizuki's strange stance made Nagi's siblings suspicious. But she still perfectly hit the bullseye. Even more surprising, Amano also hit the same spot. During the match, the two kept questioning each other. But everything revolved around Nagi. The tension between them kept rising. Because neither of them was willing to yield. Mochizuki then seemed to understand the recent situation. Because she had not been here before all this happened. So she now wanted to learn more about everything. After achieving what she wanted, she suddenly left, leaving everyone there confused. They couldn't understand what Mochizuki was thinking. But Nagi quickly ran after her. At that moment, he was surprised by what Mochizuki said. Because she claimed Nagi was being toyed with by fate. Mochizuki even felt that he was desperately struggling inside it. And indeed, that was exactly the case. Because Nagi currently had a fiancé. And the girl he liked already had a fiancé as well. As for Saki, she didn't want her brother marrying anyone at all. So Nagi no longer knew what to do. If this situation continued like this, Nagi felt like he might die. That was why Mochizuki appeared at just the right time. She was willing to pull Nagi out of his troubles. And Nagi could even move on to a new chapter if he agreed to marry Mochizuki. Because she truly loved Nagi. Unexpectedly, Mochizuki was confessing her love to him. But she left immediately afterward. Yet Nagi's heart was still unsettled. Because this was the first time someone had confessed to him like that. It made Nagi's heart race uncontrollably. Amano and Saki saw his current state and became worried. So the two cooked a meal to nourish him. But he still doubted their cooking skills. Then Nagi revealed that Mochizuki had confessed to him. But Amano and Saki reacted in an unexpected way. They mocked Mochizuki's actions, which made Nagi angry. Because he knew very well how serious Mochizuki was about this. And that it was a sincere confession she had held onto for 7 years. Nagi felt like they were looking down on him. As if someone like him didn't deserve to be confessed to by Mochizuki. But this was his first time experiencing something like this. So he felt a bit overwhelmed. At that moment, Nagi suddenly thought of Sagawa. Because he had once bravely confessed to the girl he liked. He didn't expect the feeling this time to be so strange. But he wanted to see a Sagawa who was like Mochizuki. Nagi immediately rushed to her house. Which made Sagawa confused about why he was even there. But Nagi himself couldn't answer that question either. Because it was just an impulse of the moment. As for Sagawa, she had been extremely busy these days because the shrine her family managed would soon hold a special festival. This year, she was responsible for organizing the event, so she couldn't avoid the busy workload. A while later, Nagi told Sagawa about the confession, but she didn't show any emotion at all, which left Nagi feeling disappointed, since he thought it would make her flustered. But reality was not like that. Sagawa even sent an invitation to Mochizuki. Because the festival would take place the next day. And so everyone showed up the following day. Mochizuki unexpectedly became extremely excited. Because it had been so long since she last experienced a festival like this. And also because she got to go together with Nagi this time. So she was really looking forward to it. A moment later, Sagawa appeared. She finally met Mochizuki face to face. But Sagawa's gaze was filled with killing intent. Making everyone nearby anxious. Nagi was surprised when people mentioned the cosplay portion. Because cosplay was one of the main highlights of the festival. Which meant it was something everyone wanted to participate in. Unexpectedly, Sagawa quickly appointed Nagi as the judge. So all the girls became extremely focused. Since they all wanted to win in Nagi's eyes. And at that moment, Nagi sensed that something bad was coming. Then everything proceeded as planned. But Nagi seemed nervous. Because this was his first time doing something like this. He even had to choose one of the 3 girls to become the winner. Which terrified Nagi. Because he knew it wouldn't be easy. And the first participant was Amano. The moment Nagi saw her, he recognized her immediately. Meanwhile, Amano remained confident in her cosplay performance. And surprisingly, this was actually Sagawa's idea. As for Saki, her performance was extremely successful. She completely captured the audience's attention. Because Sachi's cute schoolgirl cosplay made everyone gasp in admiration. However, Nagi suddenly reacted strongly. because he only wanted Saki to remain his little sister. When Sagawa appeared, she became the contestant Nagi was most looking forward to. And indeed, Sagawa's impact was tremendous. She made the entire audience excited with her captivating appearance. And the final contestant was Mochizuki. She was actually the one Nagi worried about the most, because he had no idea what Mochizuki planned to do for the cosplay contest. Unexpectedly, she didn't just participate normally, Mochizuki actually turned it into a full concert. Her unique and bold performance made the crowd more thrilled than ever. Even Nagi felt the same excitement. At that moment, all eyes were focused on Mochizuki. The next morning, after the contest had ended, Nagi continued rewatching Mochizuki's performance. This made Saki feel a bit jealous. But since Nagi had voted for her the day before, Saki felt slightly better. After that, the two enjoyed the amusement park together, since it was the reward for the winner. Surprisingly, all 4 girls received the same score. But except for Saki, the others weren't interested in going. So Saki ended up being the one accompanying Nagi. However, their relationship started becoming strange, because Saki began having different thoughts about Nagi. She even remembered their accidental kiss. This made Nagi nervous, and he quickly walked away, since he believed it was simply a tiny accident. When everyone returned to school, the students were buzzing about Nagi. They had discovered that Mochizuki was a famous artist. And even more shocking was the rumor that she was dating Nagi. Nagi himself was stunned by this. Reporters even gathered at the school gate, which made Nagi even more anxious. He feared he would get into trouble because of this. At that moment, Nagi received a letter from Sagawa. She asked him to come to the rooftop because she had something to say. Sagawa had also heard about the shocking rumor, and she even thought Nagi was truly dating Mochizuki. But that wasn't the case at all, which made Nagi panic even more. He feared Sagawa would misunderstand, so Nagi immediately tried to prove his innocence. However, Sagawa wasn't angry at him at all. She invited Nagi simply because she wanted to study together. So Nagi felt relieved. It turned out Sagawa had always liked Mochizuki's songs, which was why she invited her to the festival. Because Sagawa was actually a fan of Mochizuki. Even Nagi was surprised by this. He never imagined Mochizuki was that famous. But at that moment, Sagawa suddenly felt insecure, as if she was just a background side character. She felt like she was getting in the way of Mochizuki and Nagi. Suddenly, Nagi stood up, denying all of Sagawa's insecurities. This gave Sagawa more courage, and she began doing something reckless. Sagawa suddenly grabbed Nagi's collar and kissed him on the cheek, which made Nagi completely freeze. But Sagawa quickly ran off afterward, leaving Nagi standing there confused, not understanding anything that was happening. When Nagi was about to go home, he ran into Amano. She had noticed a huge number of reporters outside. Amano was afraid it would affect Nagi, so she led him to a different exit to avoid the reporters. Then Nagi explained everything to Amano. Even Nagi revealed the shocking incident from earlier, about how Sagawa had kissed him on the cheek. He didn't expect Sagawa to immediately say she wanted to cut ties with him, which left him completely unable to understand anything. At that moment, Amano just sat beside him and listened to his story, which made him guess that perhaps Amano had also seen what happened. And indeed, that was the case. At that time, Amano happened to be outside and overheard the entire thing. And she was also very shocked when she learned about it. Meanwhile, Nagi was still feeling depressed, because he had no idea where this situation would lead. His life was getting more and more chaotic. Seeing Nagi suffering like that, Amano couldn't bear to watch him in such pain. She then gently advised Nagi to calm down. They needed to have a family meeting with Saki to find a solution. Unexpectedly, this action from Amano made Nagi feel that she was incredibly trustworthy. Suddenly, Nagi received a message from Mochizuki. It turned out she wanted Nagi to come to her house to listen to music. Because Mochizuki had just finished working on something, so Nagi decided to go there, partly because he wanted to find out more about the dating rumors between them. At that moment, Nagi happened to walk past his parents' restaurant. He didn't expect that because of the dating rumors between him and Mochizuki, his parents' restaurant had become much more crowded. Afterwards, Nagi finally arrived at Mochizuki's house. But when he entered her room, he was shocked to see the entire room filled with pictures of himself. It turned out Mochizuki simply wanted to hang up photos of Nagi. Nagi then brought up the dating rumors between the two of them. Unexpectedly, Mochizuki didn't react at all. It turned out she was the one who spread the rumor. Since she was young, Mochizuki had always been avoided by others. So she didn't have a single real friend. Nagi was the only person who ever talked to her. That's why the two of them later became extremely close friends. Mochizuki now couldn't live without Nagi. And that was exactly the reason she created the dating rumor. When Nagi returned home, his biological mother suddenly appeared. However, Nagi still wasn't used to this, because the two of them hadn't contacted each other for so long. It turned out she came because of the dating rumor involving Nagi. Unexpectedly, Nagi's mom burst into laughter, because she thought the situation was extremely hilarious. Even she knew the rumor was completely untrue. However, if reporters found out that Nagi already had a fiancé, and that the two of them were even living together, then it would surely become a major scandal. So their mother immediately came up with a plan. They would have to stay together in a hotel room. That night, Saki was extremely sad, because she found out Nagi and Amano were staying together at the hotel, while Saki was alone in her small room. At that time, Nagi also became embarrassed, because he was forced to stay with Amano for 2 whole weeks. Although they had lived together before, things were completely different now. However, Amano would try to endure it, because she knew this happened every time trouble occurred. Trying to run away would be useless anyway. A moment later, the staff brought food to the room. Nagi was shocked when he got the chance to taste premium beef. However, he still couldn't help feeling curious about his powerful biological mother. Amano didn't deny anything. She even pointed out many of her flaws. Although their mother looked gentle on the outside, deep down she was very unusual. After that, Amano left the room. Suddenly, Nagi heard a loud scream. So he rushed over to see what was happening. It turned out Amano was stuck on a shelf, because she had climbed onto a chair to reach something. However, Amano couldn't endure it any longer. So she immediately jumped down. Unexpectedly, Amano landed straight onto Nagi's face, which made her blush in embarrassment. Even though Amano was the one who caused this shameful scene, Nagi still felt sorry seeing her like that, so he asked if she was okay. But Amano felt that the next 2 weeks of living together would be very tough. After that, she went to take a bath. However, Nagi had been waiting outside for quite a while, so he began to feel worried. Therefore, Nagi knocked on the door to ask how she was doing. Unexpectedly, Amano was feeling dizzy. Perhaps she had soaked in hot water for too long. Nagi had no choice but to carry Amano to the bed. But while the two of them were talking, their mother was secretly watching through the camera. Amano knew very well that their mother had countless tricks. But at the moment she couldn't do anything about it. So it was best for the two of them to just ignore each other. But Nagi suddenly stared at Amano, surprising her by asking what her favorite color was, which startled her because of the sudden question. After that, Amano began overthinking all sorts of things. While their mother had no idea what the two were thinking, she had no choice but to move on to her next plan. She suddenly pressed a button on the TV, making the two of them panic and cling tightly to each other. Only after calming down did they finally let go. But their mother didn't stop there. She turned off the air conditioner next, causing their room to gradually heat up, and hilarious situations began to unfold, making their mother laugh uncontrollably. Eventually, Nagi finally went to sleep. Suddenly, Amano sat up. She wanted to get some water to drink. Unexpectedly, she accidentally grabbed Nagi's hand instead. But she didn't care and bit down hard on his fingertip, causing Nagi to scream in helplessness. Amano suddenly woke up and realized what had happened. But she told herself it was just a misunderstanding. As for Nagi, he still wondered why their mother did all of this. Even though she wanted to isolate them, she locked them together instead. Amano calmly explained that everything was just one of her mother's games. They were merely chess pieces for her amusement. And indeed, what Amano thought was true. But Nagi thought in the complete opposite direction. He believed this was a test from their mother, to see whether they were truly worthy of becoming husband and wife. At that moment, Nagi resolved not to be defeated by anyone. Meanwhile, Mochizuki was feeling uneasy because Nagi hadn't replied to her message yet, the one she had sent earlier. The next morning, Nagi woke up and was surprised because Amano had already finished breakfast. However, when Nagi saw the pile of bread, he immediately felt fed up. Because for Nagi, mornings must be eaten with white rice. Right then, Amano responded, saying that Nagi was demanding too much. He even criticized the daily meals. Amano then strengthened her resolve, because she knew her mother was watching them, and probably thought Amano would cry and beg to leave, or even try to break down the door to escape. But this time, Amano would show her mother a completely different version of herself. No matter what happens, she would be the one to decide her own life. Meanwhile, Saki was at the shrine with Sagawa. Saki was proudly showing off her academic achievements. But Sagawa only cared about Nagi, because he didn't come to school that day either. This made Saki troubled, because she knew the truth behind the situation. But Saki couldn't reveal the secret, even though she knew the other two were being confined by their mother in the hotel. Their mother suddenly turned on the TV. She asked Amano and Nagi how their life in captivity felt. But Amano didn't react at all. So their mother immediately came up with a new plan. She created a game that came with a special reward. The winner would get whatever they wanted. Nagi became excited after hearing that and agreed immediately. Then the TV showed a picture of Amano when she was little. Amano instantly buried her face into the bed out of embarrassment. When their mother asked Nagi who that girl was, he confidently answered that it could only be Amano. And so, the game continued. Unexpectedly, their mother remembered many details from Amano's childhood. Nagi was extremely surprised. He realized their mother must truly love Amano very much, to be able to remember all those things. Meanwhile, Nagi himself didn't know much about Amano's past. But at present, she was always cheerful and full of energy. And Nagi had witnessed all of that, from when they used to live together before. Instead of looking into her past, Nagi chose to look toward the future. He looked at the Amano of today when thinking about marriage. But this made their mother irritated, because it reminded her of her own husband. After that, she decided to let them off for a day, simply because she was busy with work at the moment. After both of them won the game, Amano requested a tablet so she could pass the time, while Nagi asked for study materials. He wanted to use his free time to review his lessons. Suddenly, a hand appeared out of nowhere, frightening them both. Even Amano fainted from shock. It turned out to be Mochizuki. Mochizuki didn't expect Amano to be that timid. She then grabbed Nagi's hand and tried to pull him away from the place. But Nagi immediately refused Mochizuki's idea. He believed running away wasn't a good solution. Nagi insisted on staying at the hotel, even though he didn't feel comfortable there either. But after recalling Amano's words, he knew that running away wouldn't solve anything. Mochizuki was amazed upon hearing that. She didn't expect their relationship to be that strong. They helped each other grow in a positive way. However, that was family, not love. Mochizuki then began scolding Nagi, saying she had abandoned her family just to return to Japan. She had confessed to Nagi countless times, yet all she received was coldness. It felt like Nagi didn't care about her at all. At that moment, Amano regained consciousness. Mochizuki immediately stood tall and confident. She wanted to have a frank conversation with Amano, and it seemed Amano wasn't afraid of her at all. But Nagi felt something bad was about to happen, so he quietly tried to escape. However, both girls saw him and stopped him instantly. Mochizuki then got straight to the point. She wanted her rival, Amano, to cancel the engagement, but Amano had already thought about this before. However, she simply couldn't do that, because the reason she lived with Nagi was to become independent. It was true. Amano used to be a completely different person. Compared to back then, she had improved tremendously, but if they cancelled the engagement, then nothing would remain between them. Mochizuki felt the situation was turning in her favor, so she pulled out a marriage plan board for everyone to see. It turned out Mochizuki wanted to marry Nagi. She promised she would stay home and be a gentle, devoted wife. Mochizuki would even handle all the housework. On the surface, it seemed like a great plan, but Amano said it was completely unrealistic. Nagi tried to stop the argument, and he was honestly happy that Mochizuki cared so much about him. But Amano made it clear to everyone, marriage does not always bring happiness. Yet Mochizuki absolutely refused to accept that. At this moment, Nagi felt that the situation might go further, so he intended to stop the two girls. But it seemed things would not be that easy. Suddenly, the situation changed dramatically, because after the argument earlier, the two girls finally understood each other better. At the same time, they also realized many things. Meanwhile, Nagi was completely confused, since he had just seen the two girls arguing earlier. But now they suddenly made up so abruptly. At least both of them had calmed down. Everyone then discussed a new plan to get out of here. Unexpectedly, Mochizuki had already prepared a safe hiding place beforehand. After everyone finished discussing the plan, the two girls ran off ahead, leaving Nagi alone in utter confusion. Suddenly, their mother appeared out of nowhere. It turned out she had already known about their plan. However, at this point, both mothers had changed. She only wanted to protect her children, but now it seemed like that was no longer necessary. She then allowed her children to do whatever they wanted. After that, Amano rushed straight into the room. She questioned why Nagi was being so slow. Amano then dragged him out first. But once everyone was in the car, she kept nagging non-stop about Nagi's actions earlier. However, Mochizuki also admitted that part of it was her fault. She would reflect and act more carefully next time. Suddenly, Nagi was kicked out of the car, while Amano continued riding with Mochizuki to another place. After a while observing the surroundings, Nagi suddenly jolted in surprise, because he was standing right in front of a shrine gate. Then he saw Sagawa walking toward him. This made Nagi incredibly excited, since it had been a long time since they last met. Nagi followed Sagawa into the house. After that, he drank a cup of tea after a long day. However, Sagawa still didn't say a single word, which made Nagi a bit worried, because he feared that Sagawa might still be angry with him. But things were not as Nagi imagined. Sagawa had already heard the entire story from Mochizuki, and after hearing it, she made a strong decision. Sagawa would no longer be a background character. She would stand up, face every challenge, and become a main character. At that moment, Nagi also became excited because of Sagawa's determined words earlier. As for Amano, she would move to her biological parents' house for a week. However, Saki was visibly disappointed, because that person wasn't Nagi. As for Sagawa, she invited Nagi to go take photos together. But at first, he thought she was just asking him out to hang out. But unexpectedly, Sagawa wanted to take wedding photos. And the bride and groom were none other than the two of them. Hearing this made Nagi instantly thrilled. He immediately agreed to Sagawa's request. However, her mother suddenly stopped the two of them. It turned out she already knew about Nagi's previous engagement, and even about his recent scandal. In the end, Sagawa's plan could not be carried out. So Nagi decided he would fix the situation. Instead of giving up, Nagi came up with a plan to change Sagawa's mother's mind. So he began cleaning the house. Even Sagawa's mother was shocked by the neatness. What was even more surprising was that Nagi cleaned everything by himself. He didn't stop there. Nagi continued cleaning the hallway. It became so shiny that it was unbelievable. However, none of Nagi's actions changed anything. He still couldn't win Sagawa's mother's approval. When Nagi walked out into the yard, he suddenly apologized, but Sagawa burst into laughter. It turned out that this was exactly her mother's personality. Therefore, Nagi needed to stay even more persistent than this. It turned out that Sagawa had always been persistent in the past as well. Mainly because she had been fighting against her own mother. And over time, Sagawa gradually grew stronger for the future. Unexpectedly, before Nagi could resolve this worry, another worry suddenly came crashing down on him. This time, it was Sagawa's father's turn. He was furious that someone was trying to woo his daughter. Sagawa's father decided he would handle this himself. At first, Nagi didn't know who this man was. But once he learned that it was Sagawa's father, Nagi instantly panicked out of fear. The father then challenged him to a wrestling match. If Nagi could win, he would be allowed to marry Sagawa. After that, the father got into position to start the match. Seeing that, Nagi immediately followed suit. However, he was certainly no match for Sagawa's father. Even though Nagi tried his best to push the man down, and even had Sagawa cheering for him intensely, the result was still the same. He was thrown far away by her father. Nagi quickly surrendered on the spot. Unexpectedly, Sagawa's father praised him, because in this sport, winning or losing wasn't important. What mattered most was the courage one showed before the match even began. At that moment, He also revealed that his own marriage had been arranged. When the two first met, Sagawa's mother had been terrified. She even cried a lot, because she realized she was about to marry such a giant of a man. So after they married, Sagawa's father began wooing his own wife all over again. To achieve the happy family they had today, he had gone through many hardships. Although it had been difficult, deep down he was truly happy. Because Sagawa's mother was an amazing person, and he wanted his daughter to marry someone whom she truly loved. Later on, Nagi happened to see Sagawa looking sad, because her mother had rejected the idea of taking photos. It turned out she feared that Sagawa's current fiancé would get angry if he found out. But Sagawa firmly rejected this arranged marriage, because she knew she could never find happiness in a marriage decided for her. At that moment, her mother grew angry. She refused to let her daughter say such reckless things. The atmosphere began to grow tense. So Sagawa's father rushed in to stop it. He thought things might calm down. But instead, he got scolded by his own wife. However, Sagawa's father didn't fight back at all. But just as the argument reached its peak, Nagi suddenly opened the door to speak up. Even though Sagawa's mother always acted harshly toward her husband, she still watched him closely and understood him very well. This showed that she loved her husband deeply. At that moment, Sagawa's mother became embarrassed. She tried to dodge the conversation, while Sagawa kept thanking Nagi. Because thanks to him, she understood her family better. Even though Nagi had only been here for a few days, he had already understood this much. It was truly something surprising. On the following day, while Sagawa moved closer to fix Nagi's clothes, he suddenly remembered their previous kiss. Nagi hesitantly asked Sagawa about it. He thought that kiss had only been an accident. But unexpectedly, Sagawa replied very straightforwardly, "No kiss is meaningless." Even more surprising, she smiled and said she had been looking forward to that vow-like kiss. As for Amano, she was currently helping her family with their business. Some customers were surprised by how hardworking she was, because they knew her family background wasn't ordinary. They didn't expect Amano to be this diligent. She then smiled and explained, it turned out Amano was doing that because she wanted more experience. Meanwhile, Saki suddenly became jealous, because their parents only paid attention to her older sister and didn't care about her. However, Saki was also worried about Nagi, since she didn't know how he was doing at the moment. Seeing that, Amano immediately comforted her little sister. She said maybe Nagi was just studying together with Sagawa, and Amano then reassured Saki that Nagi would definitely be fine over there. But something even more unexpected was waiting for them. At that moment, Saki received an anonymous letter. She froze on the spot, unable to believe what she was seeing. Mochizuki also received the same type of letter. Somehow, after only a few days of living together, Nagi and Sagawa had gotten married. The next morning, Nagi was praised by Sagawa's father for looking good in traditional clothing. But Nagi himself felt terrified. Yet all that fear vanished as soon as Sagawa appeared. She was breathtakingly beautiful. Even Sagawa's father couldn't control himself. He rushed over to compliment her dazzling beauty. At that moment, Nagi didn't know what to say. His heart was beating wildly. Sagawa's mother also arrived. Even then, she still hadn't fully approved of the two being together. But this was only a fake wedding. Then Amano suddenly appeared. She was curious about their wedding. However, she accidentally wore a white dress matching the bride's. So she felt guilty. But Amano then said she wanted to have a wedding like theirs too. Except she wanted hers to be even grander. A little later, everyone stepped into the ceremony. But Sagawa had hinted beforehand that she was preparing a big surprise. Even though this was just a fake wedding, Mochizuki gave an amazing performance. After the ceremony ended, Mochizuki wanted to sing one more song for Nagi. Although it lasted only a moment, her presence completely captivated Nagi. While Mochizuki was waiting for the ceremony to start, she wondered about Saki, but Saki wasn't here today. Amano revealed that her little sister was staying home to study for exams. Then the bride and groom slowly stepped out, making Sagawa's father extremely emotional. Even though he knew it was only a fake wedding, strangely, the emotions felt incredibly real. Nagi felt the same. He even thought the two of them might actually become husband and wife. Just as they were about to touch lips, Saki suddenly appeared. She had come to oppose this marriage. Saki even burst into tears. begging Sagawa not to take her brother away. It seemed like Saki had misunderstood. Because they were only having a fake wedding. So Nagi could only sigh and pull Saki outside. He then explained everything to his little sister, that the whole thing was fake. Surprisingly, Saki already knew the truth. But she didn't understand why she felt like this. It turned out Saki felt that Nagi was enjoying this too much. Because if it had been before, he would never have agreed. Instead, he would rather stay home and study. And now, he hadn't realized how much he'd change. That was what made Saki angry. At that moment, Nagi began to understand. He admitted that maybe he really had changed. Nagi used to always find excuses to avoid things like this. Because he knew nothing except studying. But after spending time with the three girls, he suddenly realized that he would get married someday. Nagi then patted his little sister's head and said, his biological father once told him that if Nagi and Saki got married to each other, it would actually make perfect sense. But he immediately refused. If Nagi had known earlier that the two of them were not blood-related, then perhaps they would have ended up getting married. However, Saki was shocked by her brother's words. She didn't understand what Nagi was talking about. After that, everyone returned to the venue to continue the party. At that moment, Amano suddenly made a suggestion. She also wanted to have a fake wedding. Although it was unexpected, all three agreed. They would take turns taking photos with Nagi. Even though it was fake, it was enough to make Nagi extremely nervous. The three girls took their turns taking pictures. And finally, it was Sachi's turn. Nagi suddenly became nervous. He told Saki not to force herself too much. But she didn't stop there. Saki suddenly closed her eyes and kissed Nagi on the lips. This shocked all the girls. They couldn't understand what was happening. When Nagi began explaining, Saki cut him off. She thought they were supposed to kiss for real. So she took the initiative. But this made Nagi visibly upset. Because he had said from the beginning that everything was fake. And above all, the two of them were still siblings. Nagi absolutely could not accept this. Saki then raised her voice in response, saying it was all just a misunderstanding. And then she immediately ran off. As for Sagawa, she felt the atmosphere had grown gloomy. So Sagawa handed out gifts to every guest. It was her way of showing gratitude. However, Amino decided to take Nagi's gift as well. At this moment, Mochizuki suddenly realized something. The people who tried to get close to Nagi were not the real enemies. That person was none other than Saki. To Nagi's siblings, everything still seemed normal. However, Mochizuki had long noticed something strange in their sibling relationship. Returning to Nagi, he was still shocked by the kiss with Saki. He could not forget that shocking moment. Nagi kept telling himself one thing. He was only Sachi's older brother. So he did not need to worry too much about it. But Saki suddenly snapped in anger. Because everyone kept bothering her older brother. This made Saki feel uncomfortable. She only did that to make them stay quiet. However, she never expected things to go this far. Saki knew this could easily cause misunderstandings. Because their relationship was that of siblings. Saki even burst into tears because she could not understand herself. Fortunately, Amano was there to comfort her. And the incident ended there. After many days passed, Nagi was finally able to return to his familiar home. His biological mother had forgiven them. Now, the two of them could simply enjoy life as before. However, Nagi seemed surprised, because when he entered the house, he saw the Amano sisters already there. Today, they wanted to hold a celebration after 2 weeks of isolation. At this moment, Saki wanted to eat the food her brother cooked. But Nagi suddenly raised his voice. He unexpectedly wanted to be alone. It turned out Nagi still remembered the previous kiss. It was still lingering in his mind. After that, Nagi tried to convince himself it was just an accident. A while later, he went out to buy food. Saki wanted to follow him. But Nagi coldly told her it was not necessary. Then he left immediately. However, Nagi could not stop blaming himself. Saki was not doing any better either. She felt sad because her brother was still upset about that incident. Seeing this, Amano stepped in to comfort her younger sister. She suggested that Nagi might just be hungry. From that point on, Nagi kept trying to avoid Saki. When it was time to eat together, Amano tried to ease the tension. However, the siblings could not bring themselves to talk. This made the atmosphere in the house more awkward. Nagi even wanted to retreat to his room to study. Amano felt relieved. She learned that the siblings had made up with each other. One day, Amano went to her father's office. Her purpose was to make a secret deal. Even Amano herself did not want this arrangement. At school, a festival was about to take place. It was a traditional event with over 50 years of history. Everyone chose Nagi as the class representative. This left him completely confused. Students were free to perform any act they wanted. The winner would be chosen by votes from the entire school. However, Nagi refused to do it. He strongly opposed the decision, but the others did not agree with him. As for Sagawa, after she heard that Nagi would participate as well, she volunteered to form a group. Her goal was to support Nagi. Sagawa also asked Amano for permission, so that she and Nagi could form a team together. Since Amano was Nagi's fiancé. Although Amano appeared to agree on the surface, she was not happy at all inside. Sagawa then mentioned a legend. If two people formed a team for this event, they would definitely end up getting married. Hearing this, Nagi blushed in embarrassment. He thought Sagawa was confessing to him, but that was not the case. Sagawa's real goal was the prize. 10 free meal tickets at the cafeteria. For someone who loved food like Sagawa, it was an amazing reward. On the way home, Amano felt annoyed by Nagi's smug expression, but she could not really blame him. Nagi had the chance to practice with Sagawa, the girl he had always secretly liked. For Nagi, this was a rare opportunity. Meanwhile, Amano had to pair up with Asuma. When everyone gathered to practice at home, Nagi grew curious and asked Amano why Asuma was also there. While the two were arguing, Asuma appeared in front of them. It turned out he already knew what had happened recently, including Nagi's engagement with Amano. After a while, Nagi returned to the main issue. He did not know what kind of performance to choose. However, Amano had many ideas. If they wanted to win, they needed to do something interesting. As for Sagawa, she dragged Nagi away to think about their act. Unexpectedly, the two ran into an embarrassing accident. Sagawa shyly apologized. She explained it happened because she was nervous. But to Nagi, it was adorable. Sagawa could be clumsy at times, and that clumsiness was incredibly cute. It was something Nagi had never seen before. While the two were getting close, Saki suddenly appeared. She was curious about what was happening between them. As for Amano's pair, they were preparing something extremely ambitious. Even Amano believed they would win first place. However, after hearing Sachi's comment, Amano's expectations were shattered, but those words were just Sachi's jealousy. She also wanted to do things like that. Sagawa had already predicted they would run out of ideas, so she prepared videos of past performances that had won in previous years. At that moment, Amano suddenly realized something. The girl in the video was her own mother. Even Nagi was shocked. He never imagined that the woman in the video was the same mother they knew today. But Amano was certain they were the same person, because she had seen old photographs before. Returning to the footage from the past, the girl pointed toward her future husband. They were Nagi's parents in the present time. After that, the two confessed in front of the crowd. However, the girl was rejected by the man. Although the details afterward were unclear, they still won first place in that event. At that moment, Amano suddenly remembered something. She could ask her mother about this story. After waiting for a while, their mother finally returned home from work. She was willing to answer all their questions. Unexpectedly, the truth was different. Their mother was not the girl in the video. However, none of the children believed her. It turned out to be a joke by their mother. Many years ago, Amano's father was the one who planned it. It was actually a plan made by both of them. The rejection during the confession was also part of the plan. After that incident, the couple became famous. In the end, all doubts were finally explained. Everyone then returned to their own homes. The next morning, while the two were making plans, Nagi suddenly wanted to change team members. And that person was none other than Amano. Even so, Nagi did not understand why he did it. Unexpectedly, Sagawa agreed right away. After that, she wanted to team up with Asuma. Just like that, the four of them swapped partners in an instant. A while later, Asuma and Sagawa returned home. Amano was surprised by Nagi's actions. But even Nagi himself could not understand his feelings. For Amano, however, the most important thing Nagi needed to do now was to sincerely apologize to Sagawa. So the next day, Nagi rushed to see her. Unexpectedly, he received a powerful kick from Sagawa. Perhaps this was her revenge for being abandoned by Nagi earlier. So he had no choice but to accept the punishment. When Nagi returned home, he suggested that Amano should confess at the school festival, and then he would immediately reject her. However, this was not easy for Amano at all. She firmly refused this plan. As for Nagi's parents, they were very surprised to hear he would join a school activity. Because in the past, Nagi only stayed home to study. It was clear that he had changed significantly. At that time, Nagi's parents planned to attend the festival. However, Nagi did not want them to do so. Suddenly, a strange young man drove a car to the shop outside. Just then, Saki happened to return home and noticed him. She thought it was Nagi, because the two looked extremely similar. But that was not the case. Even so, Saki became very curious about it. When the school festival officially began, everyone around was surprised, because Nagi's parents were also there with them. Nagi's friends were even more shocked when they learned that Saki was his younger sister. However, Saki began to nitpick at her brother. Even though the event was still ongoing, Nagi was focused on studying, which Saki could not understand at all. A while later, Amano appeared. It turned out she came to invite Nagi. She wanted the two of them to walk around the festival together. On the way, Nagi accidentally bumped into the same young man as before. However, he had no idea who that person was. Returning to Amano, she was very happy to experience the festival this time. Perhaps it was partly because Nagi was with her. At that moment, Amano expressed how happy she felt. However, Nagi did not understand what was going on. He thought Amano was hiding something from him. At that moment, Amano suddenly felt startled. Perhaps Nagi had noticed something. However, Amano did not want to reveal her secret, so Nagi did not press her any further. Eventually, the most intense part of the competition arrived. Each contestant took turns performing their acts. The parents were extremely excited as well. They wanted to see how their children would look on stage. Unexpectedly, Saki and Mochizuki formed a pair. The two prepared a very cute singing performance. Their presentation was extremely polished. Even the judges praised it highly. Next was Sagawa's group. They were considered one of the strongest pairs this year. Because of that, everyone had high expectations for them. However, Sagawa suddenly announced her withdrawal. This left everyone there completely stunned. After that came Nagi and Amano's performance. Unexpectedly, Nagi revealed their relationship, as well as the secret from the past involving the hospital incident when they were young. However, things did not go as planned. This left both of them extremely flustered. At that moment, a student from another school approached them. He suddenly used words to attack Amano. Unexpectedly, Nagi bravely stepped forward to protect her. Nagi was truly enraged. He successfully taught the guy a lesson he would never forget. Even the people around them were shocked by Nagi's righteous actions. However, the outcome was not what they had hoped for. Nagi's group was suspended for 4 days. Because of that, Nagi felt deep regret at home. He also felt guilty, because he could not win together with Amano. However, Amano's reaction was filled with gratitude, because Nagi did not hesitate to step in and protect her. That was what made Amano happiest. Then she slowly gave Nagi a gentle kiss. Amano did this to lift Nagi's spirits. At first, Nagi showed no reaction at all. But once Amano left the room, Nagi's heart began to feel strange. It kept beating uncontrollably. This made it impossible for him to calm down. When night fell, he went down to the living room. Saki was there as well. Even more surprising was that she already knew what had happened, because she had accidentally seen it earlier. She became curious about how Nagi felt. But unfortunately, he refused to share such a sensitive matter. After that, Amano appeared, forcing the two of them to face each other again. This time, they sat down and talked seriously. However, all Nagi felt was fear. Even he did not understand what he himself was thinking. After that, Nagi informed her that Saki had seen what happened between them earlier. This shocked Amano greatly. Many days later, Nagi still did not know how to face Amano. After the two of them shared their first kiss, that moment kept replaying in Nagi's mind, making it impossible for him to focus on studying. At that moment, Sagawa suddenly appeared. She even brought food for everyone. Amano was very happy that Sagawa came over. After that, the two of them sat down to eat together. Unexpectedly, Sagawa also knew about Nagi's kiss. This shocked Amano greatly. She wondered how Sagawa knew such a secret. At that moment, Nagi stood outside and heard everything. He was extremely nervous, because he feared Sagawa might misunderstand. However, to Sagawa, it was just a kiss born from family affection. Only when someone kisses you on the cheek does it become the beginning of love. After hearing Sagawa's words, Nagi felt his heart begin to flutter once again. It was because of Sagawa's indescribable cuteness. After she left, the next person to arrive was Mochizuki. She came out of curiosity about Amano and Nagi's kiss. However, Mochizuki only admired their friendship. She claimed that she and Nagi had kissed many times when they were young. But those were nothing more than Mochizuki's lies. Because Nagi had heard the entire conversation from outside, it was not until night fell that Nagi finally went outside. Unexpectedly, he saw Amano sitting alone. She was talking with a stranger. This made Nagi extremely curious. While they were talking, Amano suddenly confessed. She said that she had already fallen for Nagi. This shocked Nagi, who was standing behind her. Nagi was so stunned that he could not say a word. A while later, Amano went back inside. She noticed Nagi standing there. Perhaps she realized that he had overheard the conversation. But Nagi pretended that nothing had happened. Because of that, Amano chose not to say anything more. She was afraid that troubles would start from that moment. The next morning, Nagi unexpectedly walked toward Amano from a distance. This time, he decided to be honest with her. Nagi thanked Amano for the feelings she had for him. Unexpectedly, he admitted that he felt the same way. However, Amano could not handle this truth. She stepped forward and punched Nagi hard. Even so, Nagi's emotions were hard to describe. It seemed that he might be falling in love with Amano. Although it sounded unbelievable, everything Nagi said was true. After that, the two went to meet their father. At that moment, Nagi admitted his feelings for his fiancée. Their father could only laugh after hearing this. This surprised Amano slightly, because it was the first time she had seen her father laugh so loudly. It turned out that he had already expected things to turn out this way. However, it took longer than he had imagined. After that, Amano and Nagi spent some private time together. Amano was happy that they both found the courage today. They were finally able to say what was on their minds. Most importantly, their feelings had made real progress. Amano took the initiative to hold her fiancé's hand. She hoped they would create many more beautiful memories together. At that moment, a boy who looked just like Nagi appeared from afar. He secretly watched the happy couple. His presence felt mysterious and unsettling. Perhaps he would become an antagonist in the upcoming story. Will this boy affect Nagi and Amano's relationship? Please stay tuned for the next parts to find out. That is all for today's video. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to support Oni-chan in future videos. Thank you all for watching. Much love.